Hey guys, tonight we step out of our own noisy century and onto a quieter, heavier earth. The air presses cool and clean against your face, carrying damp soil, crushed pine, and a polite hint of animal musk that suggests you are not at the top of the food chain here. The stars are crowded, no street lamps, no jet trails, no satellites drawing tidy stitches across the sky. Just a spill of cold salt light from horizon to horizon. If you tried to live here with modern habits, you probably won't survive this. You'd be a very competent snack. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me where you're listening from and what time it is for you. I love seeing our little night map light up. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You breathe deeper, and the planet answers with a long, deliberate inhale. It is the Middle Pleistocene, about 300,000 years ago, and the world is patterned by ice that comes and goes like slow weather. This is an ice age, yes, but not the cartoon version. Not a single frozen slab that locks time in a freezer. Instead, glaciers advance and retreat over tens of thousands of years, like giant lungs. To the west, the Laurentide ice sheet sprawls across North America. To the northeast, the Scandinavian ice sheet grinds the bones of old mountains to flour. Between pulses, the land inhales again, and rivers remember their former paths. Historians still argue whether each glacial surge marched in perfect global lockstep or behaved more like a staggered orchestra, strings in one hemisphere beginning just before the brass in the other. But you feel the rhythm either way in the way wind tastes cold, even when the sun is kind. So much water is locked inside those crystalline fortresses that the seas pull back as if the tide has been told to behave. Sea level drops by roughly 120 meters, about 400 feet, exposing shelves that modern maps pretend are oceans. The world redraws itself. You can walk dry foot from what will be France to what will be Britain across a rolling, wind-swept plain stitched with rivers and reed beds. Later people will call it Doggerland, but to you it's just tomorrow's route lined with willow and hares. Far to the northeast, Siberia and Alaska shake hands across a vast, cold steppe called Beringia, a grassland highway wide as a country. And down under the southern stars, New Guinea, Australia, and Tasmania share a single outline named Sahul, a continent that feels like a rumor come true. These are the stone and grass interstates of the ancient world, lanes for hooves and paws and bare feet. You taste the air, bitter resin, clean frost, and then the ground begins to hum inside your bones. You feel them before you see them. A herd of woolly mammoths, shoulders like domes, tusks sweeping the dawn like half-moons. The sound they make isn't a stomp so much as a moving argument with gravity. A calf blunders, trumpets in outrage, and is nudged back in line by a matriarch whose eyes look old in a way you recognize. Practical, tired, tender. It's impossible not to do the mental accounting. Hides, fat, bone, a winter's worth of work in one slow-moving miracle. Then you remember the other column in the ledger, risk, and decide that admiration at a respectful distance is a perfectly valid survival tactic. This is a land of giants, of ideas so big they cast weather. On the far ridge, a silhouette breaks like an antlered sunrise. Megaloceros, the great Irish elk, whose antlers can spread wider than a car is long. 12 feet of seasonal headwear grown and shed each year as casually as you change hats. Down in the sedges, steppe bison graze in brown rivers, shoulder humps rolling under shag. Their breath fogs the air in punctuation marks. A woolly rhinoceros trundles along the edge of a drift, all muscle and keratin with a horn like a plow, leaving a furrow through the snow. Behind a limestone bluff, a cave bear sleeps, a fur-lined silence that smells faintly of earth and old leaves. The scenery doesn't care whether you're impressed, which, honestly, is part of the charm. You kneel, the coarse blades rasping your palms. Through a screen of seed heads, you watch a family of straight-tusked elephants, taller than mammoths, smoother of coat, move in a choreography that feels familiar. The matriarch pauses, tips her head, and hushes the world with her sighs. A calf catches a root and tumbles. Another adult reaches with a trunk, steadying the rolling barrel with a grace that would embarrass most of us parallel parking. Their skin is a topography of folds dusted with pale mud. Their feet spread and flex like living snowshoes, softening each step. They are gardeners of the continent, ecosystem engineers, knocking down trees to open sunny patches, digging water holes that will outlast memory, carving paths that herds and later people will follow. You could swear the matriarch glances your way and files you under non-urgent, which is generous of her. You stand and feel small in a way that feels correct. The wind combs the grasses into a single silver pelt. A flock of cranes lifts, arguing politely about destination. Somewhere, 3 ridges away or 3 miles, you hear wolves filing the edges off silence. The world is busy, but not with you. Your job here is observation. Learn the grammar of hoof and tusk and claw. Learn which shadows are just weather and which are fate with teeth. You tuck your hands into your sleeves and pretend you're less appetizing than you look. The performance is for you more than them. A mainstream fact to anchor your bearings. These Pleistocene ice sheets and low seas created real land bridges. Doggerland in the North Atlantic, Beringia between Asia and the Americas, and Sahul linking Australia with New Guinea and Tasmania, that humans and animals used like roads. A quirky tidbit for your inner trivia collector. Those Megaloceros antlers, magnificent on museum mounts, could weigh more than 40 kilograms. Imagine carrying an entire airline luggage allowance on your forehead and still needing to outrun wolves. Your neck aches in sympathy. You follow the margin of a marsh that, in another age, will drown beneath the North Sea. Dragonflies skim like living paperclips. A snipe sows the air with a needle-thin call. Far off, the mammoths shrink to grey commas, drifting across a golden sentence of grass. Your breath ghosts in front of you. A fox stands on a tussock and scolds with the confidence of someone who pays no rent. There is no engine noise, only wind and wing, and the gentle creak of cold. When the breeze veers, scent arrives in layers. Dried grass, dung, cold stone, a little sweetness like crushed thyme. An aroma that, if bottled, would be banned from office elevators for being too honest. You notice the sky again. With no city haze, the Milky Way is thick enough to cast the faintest, most stubborn sort of shadow. You could navigate by it if you had somewhere to be. And you do, because though this earth feels like a museum that wandered outdoors, it isn't fixed. The glacial breath keeps time. Coastlines creep, rivers change their minds, herds redraw maps with their hooves. You keep pace, shoes of hide whispering over frost-silver grass, and try not to think about how your modern step counter would resign on the spot. You crouch to drink from a shallow tea-brown stream, hands cupped. The cold is a small slap, then a blessing. Across the water, a boar lifts its wedge head, assesses you the way a locksmith assesses a lock, and decides you're not worth the deposit. Above you, a vulture hangs on nothing, reading the land for stories. You read it too. Crushed stems where mammoths passed, the scuffed patch where bison rolled, the clean, sun-polished rib that says a cat ate well and might be napping nearby. Beauty and danger arrive in the same envelope. Your job is to open it slowly. This is the stage. Ice breathing in the north, seas pulled tight like bedsheets, land bridges unrolling like new lanes, herds thick as weather, predators stitched into the edges. And onto this stage, a special kind of animal is walking. It walks on two legs, it carries fire and sharpened stone, it maps the sky in stories and the ground in footprints. It looks around and recognizes something in the eyes of elephants and something else in the eyes of wolves. This creature is you, but you are not one. You are many. Your human family is scattered across the wide face of this planet. Some of you stocky and storm-strong in the cold. Some of you small and clever in islands of green. Some of you enduring like old fire in the African night. The stage is set. The lights come up. Somewhere, cousins you haven't met are watching the same sky, wondering the same stubborn human thought. Who else is out there? Walking. Morning heat gathers on your shoulders like a friendly animal, and the light over the stony hills feels older than language. A shallow watering hole flickers in the distance, brown, precious, rimmed with hoof prints and the comma-shaped signatures of birds. You move slowly, palms open, because your reflection is not the only one on the surface. Figures are already there. They stand upright, their bodies casting clean human shadows, and yet something in the angle of jaw and brow is different enough to make your heart rehearse a retreat. You know kin when you see it, and you know competition. You wait. This is the part of the story where old-school diagrams tried to hand you a tidy parade. Ape to caveman to you, like a marching band that gradually learns to shave. It's a lovely poster and a terrible map. The truth under this sun is messier and more generous. Think of humanity the way you think of the big cats. Lion, tiger, jaguar, leopard, cousins with shared bones and different solutions. So it is with your family. Multiple kinds of humans share the stage, each tuned to the place that raised them. You are a member of a clan. Yes, but the clan has branches you haven't shaken hands with yet. The land itself whispers the family secret. Not far from where you stand, what will one day be called Jebel Irhoud in Morocco, stone flakes still carry the heat of very old fires, and skulls with modern-looking faces tell a mainstream fact worth holding tight. Some of the earliest known Homo sapiens bones, around 300,000 years old, come from here. The wind that lifts grit from the ground has been breathing over our kind for that long in this place. You flex your fingers and imagine them reaching back through time, touching ochre-stained hands that cooked with the same cautious joy. At the water's rim, the others shift. Their silhouettes are thick through the chest, powerful through thigh and forearm, with faces slightly pulled forward, noses wide to warm, cold air. You catch the stacked line of brow ridges and understand that these are not your people, but they are people. Neanderthals, northern kings, storm-strong, carved by winters that would make your modern thermostat sob. Historians still argue whether Neanderthals ranged this far south at this moment, or whether you're witnessing one of many seasonal pulses that brought cousins into one another's orbits. But the calculus of the scene doesn't wait for journals to catch up. Thirst equals truce. You idle, letting your shadow shrink, and pretend casually that you were always planning to count birds first. You have never counted birds in your life. The waiting is education. You look from face to face and feel the family tree loosen into a thicket. Behind the Neanderthals, further up the slope of time, stands Homo heidelbergensis. Big-boned, clever hunters, likely the common ancestor of both Neanderthals and Sapiens, a sturdy trunk from which your branches diverge. If the family held reunions, these would be the uncles who can start a fire in sleet and insist you take a second mammoth steak. Further back still, Homo erectus, the great survivor, walked out of Africa over 1 million years before you, carrying the Acheulean hand axe like a passport. They taught the world the rhythm of feet over distance and the value of a good edge. Their lesson plan was longevity. The line does not march, it fans. Your own branch looks almost delicate by comparison. You are graceful, slimmer bones, narrower cheeks, and you rely on the dangerous, invisible muscle behind your eyes. Language twists and blooms there. You can talk about the lion you saw yesterday at the bend of the river and plan for the ambush tomorrow. You can trade not just meat, but promises, which is an even bigger gamble. When you watch the Neanderthals at the water, how they gesture, how they space their bodies like punctuation, you recognize a grammar different from yours and still entirely legible. You breathe out slowly, an exaggerated show of peace, and take a measured step closer. You are trying to look non-threatening while holding a spear. It's the Stone Age equivalent of smiling while carrying a ladder. Intros come in glimpses as the day lengthens. The elders. Homo erectus, square-hipped horizon chasers with 1 million years of field notes etched into their habits. The European ancestors. Homo heidelbergensis, whose wooden spears at sites like Schöningen, a fringe-feeling tidbit that is nonetheless true, show a talent for precision that would make a javelin coach proud. The Northern Kings. Neanderthals, with brains as large as, often larger than, yours. Hands that could split a femur, and on long winter nights maybe mix ochre with marrow to stripe a forearm for reasons both practical and ceremonial. The Eastern Ghosts. Denisovans. A sister lineage known from a handful of bones and a whole genome, their realm vast and their legacy stitched into modern people of Oceania and parts of Asia. The Little People. Homo floresiensis. Island miniatures with tools sharp enough to embarrass anyone who equates brain volume with outcome. The Newcomers. You, Homo sapiens, fresh from African fires, carrying stories like spare knives. Movement at the outcrop. A Neanderthal child advances a cautious pace, then looks back for permission. A broad palm drops gently onto a small shoulder. The message is simple. Drink, but don't invite trouble home. Your group mirrors the motion. 2 of you kneel at the muddy edge, while the rest stand watch with the air of bored sculptures. Everyone here pretends the other is a weather feature. You hear the hollow cluck of a sand grouse, the trickle of seepage, the close breath of someone not far from your elbow whose genes will one day ride quietly inside yours. The idea itself is so intimate you feel shy. A necklace flashes when a Neanderthal turns, a sliver of bone and possibly an eagle talon polished to a soft shine. It's a small, showy, wonderfully human thing, and a fine, quirky tidbit to tuck away. Some Neanderthals likely wore raptor talons as ornaments, not just because they could, but because meaning likes to sit where eyes can find it. They are not brutes. They are neighbors with taste. You catch yourself wondering how they thread such small holes with such large fingers, then remember that strength and finesse, are not opposites. The air cools as the sun folds toward the rocks. Someone in your band lifts a small pouch with a handful of shells and a scatter of red ochre. An offer is made without a word. A Neanderthal examines the color, rubs it on the back of a wrist, sniffs as if testing for lies, and nods. In return, a flake of exceptional flint changes hands. The whole exchange lasts less than a minute and means far more than it looks. You feel the thinnest muscle of trust twitch alive. Tomorrow, there might be tips about a herd's trail. Next season, a warning about a cave with a bad-tempered bear. In a decade, someone you haven't met yet might share a fire with someone from that outcrop. And a child with mixed eyes will listen to two sets of stories and understand both. But the truce is practical, not romantic. You watch the way they move as they leave, closer to the ground, ready to explode forward, the gait of ambush hunters. Your own people favor distance and planning, comfort with arcs and timing. The difference is not just aesthetic, it is strategy. The beginning of a divergence that will ripple through tools, clothing, and numbers. Later, it will matter. For now, you let them go without shadowing. Curiosity is not the same as wisdom, and you have learned to keep those two on speaking terms. When the last ripple on the pool settles, you drink. The water is a little tannic, a little warm, exactly perfect. You taste grit and think of family trees again, how some branches reach into cold valleys, some toward islands, some back across old savannas. Historians still argue whether certain fossils belong to one species or another. Heidelbergensis, Rhodesiensis, early Sapiens, whether names should be split like hairs or braided like rope. But your mouthful of water reduces taxonomy to its quiet point. Many kinds of humans stand under one heat, read one sky, and solve one ancient problem: how to see tomorrow. As dusk settles, you look east, away from the Atlantic glare, toward lands where your elders once walked with the steadiness of seasons. To understand your improbable journey, you will need to walk with them a while, feel their tools sit in your palm, hear their fires teach the night to behave, pace their patient horizons. The path back to the pioneers is already under your feet. Humidity beads on your forearms, and the forest hums like a living drum. Java has a way of making every leaf feel loud. You move through pandanus and palm with knees bent, placing your feet where your leader places theirs, copying not just the path, but the tempo. You are Homo erectus, hips steady, shoulders ropey, jaw a little heavier than the mirror you know. Your brow throws a permanent shade over your eyes, a ridge that makes you look permanently skeptical, which saves you from having to explain yourself. The skull under that ridge is smaller than a modern one, but immense compared to any ape's. The trick isn't raw volume, it's how you spend it. You spend it on distance, on rhythm, on remembering where water hides in a dry month and which trees sweat edible gum. You are the enduring one. Time stretches behind you in a way that makes the years feel like pebbles. Your kind ranges from about 1.8 million years ago until, on this island, astonishingly late, perhaps as recently as roughly 117,000 years ago, along a river the future will call Solo. That's the mainstream fact that settles into your stride, longevity as a technology. You inherit not only tools but habits, and habits become a civilization written in footsteps. Historians still argue whether the last Javan Erectus saw the first flickers of newcomers from the west, or whether the island's story ended quietly before other branches arrived. But the forest doesn't care about endings. It cares about today's rain. At your belt hangs a thing that is not a thing. It is a thought with edges. The Aculean hand axe sits heavy and right in your palm. Teardrop, symmetrical, an argument for geometry made in stone. You learned its shape by watching hands more scarred than yours turn a river cobble into intention. Hard hammer to knock off the first bold flakes. Soft hammer, antler or dense wood, to correct the curve, to thin the body until light catches along a new spine. When you grip it, the haft of your wrist aligns naturally. The center of mass tells you what jobs it wants: to split hide, to shave wood, to punch into marrow as if bones had been designed for sharing. The Stone Age Swiss Army knife, minus the warranty, and with much better customer service. Your band counts about 20, enough hands to carry skill, not so many that the forest starves you for it. The daily agenda is older than writing: water, calories, edges, shelter, each threaded through with watchfulness. Words, as your descendants will know them, haven't been invented. Your vocabulary is built from gesture, posture, breath, and the percussive grammar of flint struck right. A palm up means wait, a chin twitch means look, a hiss means now, a lifted brow, you have one long continuous brow, so this is comedy, means did you hear that? Group chat is eye contact and eyebrow choreography. Nobody mutes it, and somehow it works. You are not bringing down giants today. Megafauna exist here, yes, but the forest favors quiet prey. A tortoise the size of your chest scuffs along a leaf-litter path, head nodding in prehistoric patience. The plan is old. 2 to distract, 2 to lift. You step in at the same heartbeat as your partner, rock your weight, and in one practiced, almost tender motion, the shell becomes a bowl with legs pedaling air. The animal hisses like a kettle. You murmur an apology you don't have words for and get to the honest business of living. A sturdy stick becomes a pry bar. A hand axe kisses through ligament. Fat and meat answer the questions the day has asked. It is not a heroic hunt, which is exactly why it's perfect. Your survival strategy is not bravado. It's mathematics. Back at the shelter, a shallow overhang above a slow, brown river, you tend the miracle you did not invent, but have learned to keep. Fire. Blackened stones ring the glow. Ash archives the meals of weeks. A log shifts and the camp smells briefly of sugar. Sap meets flame and caramel happens in a century without desserts. You lay meat on hot stone and it protests, then surrenders. Cooking is an external stomach. Fibers soften, parasites die, calories unlock. You eat more for less chewing, and the time you don't spend grinding raw roots, you spend doing the future's homework. Napping, mending, watching. Many archaeologists think your kind was the first to use fire routinely, with hints buried in places like Wonderwerk Cave far to the west and Char in caves across Asia. Historians still argue whether you can call sparks from wood or stone at will, or whether you mostly stole lightning and guarded it like a pet that sometimes eats the furniture. Either way, your nights are warmer and your stories longer. Stories? Yes, even without speech as your descendants wield it. Around the coals, hands talk. A scar is a sentence. A pantomime of river depth is a paragraph. The path traced with a stick through ash is a map, revised by 3 more sticks until a plan emerges durable enough to wake for. Children watch. They test edges on driftwood. They learn a secret we sometimes forget. Competence is soothing. Someone hums through their nose, and the group hums back. The night becomes a low, contented engine. It's not that fear is gone. It's that fear has a boundary now, the radius of your light. Your tool culture is a quiet thunder. The hand axe design travels continents nearly unchanged for more than 1 million years. A stability that looks like stagnation to impatient modern eyes, and like elegance to yours. When something works everywhere, it stops being fashion and becomes law. Still, variation sneaks in. A quirky tidbit to amuse the future. Some hand axes are so big and so outrageously symmetrical that their practicality is suspect. Oversized showpieces, as if someone napped a business card. Were they ritual? Courtship displays? Proof of skill flexes left conspicuously near favorite paths? You can feel the urge yourself to make one as perfect as the river allows, to leave it where eyes will find it, to let your competence gleam a little in the sun. Not everything you do is for calories. Afternoon rain scrubs heat from leaves. You use the lull to refurbish edges. Strike, turn, strike, turn. A heartbeat you can hear in your wrists. The flakes themselves are gifts. Razor slivers tucked for later. Scalpels born from a parent blade. You cache a few along a root buttress for tomorrow's version of you. This habit, thinking beyond the hour, might be your most radical invention. Predators pass through your periphery. A clouded leopard's tail writes cursive at the margin of sight and then erases itself. You leave it alone because you like having both hands. Toward evening, your group drifts toward the hearth like filings to a magnet. Meat hisses, tubers steam in a pocket of earth. The first moths try out ugly dances in the light. Someone brings a long green branch and holds it near flame to harden its tip. A trick that makes wood bite deeper, last longer. You test the point with your thumb and feel how fire persuades materials to agree with you. This is what you're good at. Nudging the world. Longevity has costs, and you pay them honestly. Bones remember accidents. Rib bruises from falls, healed fractures, a shoulder that complains when the rain is early. But you also remember rescue. Once, when your ankle turned, the group slowed for a week. An elder gave you marrow and let you lean. You walked again. Compassion isn't a modern app. It's the original survival feature. Night returns with cricket applause. The river makes polite throat-clearing sounds below. You watch sparks ascend and think about horizons you haven't yet met. To the north, cold forges a different kind of cousin. Thick-bodied, close-quarters hunters with lungs for winter and hands that make stout points from flint. Their valleys sound like ice grinding its teeth. While you perfect an elegant old answer, they are becoming a new one. Shorter, stronger, tuned to the bite of wind. The world is setting its next quiz. You feed the fire a last stick and let your eyes ride the red. Tomorrow will be another patient theorem. Track, calculate, lift, share, sharpen, sleep. Tradition is not laziness, it's memory you can hold. But the air beyond the tree line tastes faintly of change, and change is the one animal you cannot ambush. You'll meet it on open ground, with edges ready. The wind has teeth, and you let it chew your cheeks because the bite tells you where the weather is coming from. Ice glows on the far ridge like a sleeping animal. The cave behind you exhales heat you worked all morning to trap. You stamp snow from your boots of stitched hide and feel your body answer the cold the way it always has. Short limbs, wide chest, strong forearms, a nose broad and deep to warm the air before it reaches the lungs. Your brow ridge throws a built-in visor over your eyes, handy in glare, fashionable in precisely one epoch. You are Neanderthal, and this valley in what will someday be Germany is your garden. You do not rush. Speed is for the last 5 heartbeats of a hunt. Everything before that is patience. Your companions melt out from behind dwarf pines one by one, furs dark with rime. Hands smell of flint, sinew, and the fat smoke of last night's fire. You inventory tools without speaking. Stout spears tipped with Mousterian points struck from prepared cores, edges tuned by the Levallois trick, until a single flake snaps off like a decision. The points sit in their shafts with rawhide bindings and a shine of pitch. You touch one, and the resin gives a tacky kiss. Stone Age chemistry whispering that it knows what glue is. You breathe through your nose to test the air. Horse, a little musk of deer, old fox, the mineral hush of snow. Far down slope a narrow corridor squeezes the herd's path between rock and scrub. Your people have read this page before. The plan is not complicated. Neither is a cliff. 2 of you will show yourselves at the last instant. 1 will throw a stone, 3 will explode from the ravine with spears leveled, and the snow will remember the rest. You flex your fingers until blood bristles back to the tips, then go still. There is no OSHA. Your safety briefing is Auntie pointing at her healed ribs and saying, essentially, don't. The first horses arrive delicate-eared and frost-breathing, placing their feet where last year's herd taught them to place them. Your signal is a shoulder twitch from the leader. The world snaps from patience to violence. You surge. The spear is not thrown but driven, and the clearing fills with steam and noise, the thud of bodies, the barked shouts that are not words and still move like grammar, the wet thunder of hooves. A mare wheels, a hoof finds a thigh, and you ride that pain like a sled while your cousins finish what you all started. When the stillness returns, it is absolute. Your hands shake, then steady. Later, bones will heal in patterns that the future will recognize. Rodeo rider injuries written into a fossil record. Proof of a life lived close to heavy animals. You drag meat onto a sled of woven branches. Children run messages and gather fallen spears with the gravity of apprentices. Back at the cave, heat blooms around the lip of the hearth. Smoke etches the ceiling black. Sparks wander up and die among old soot constellations. You stew bones until the marrow lets go and smear tallow into creases of cracked skin. The smell is equal parts comfort and mammoth. Call it eau de cerveau, number 5. Firelight pulls faces from shadow. It paints your people in reds and golds until even scars look deliberate. Someone grinds red ochre in a hollow stone with a pebble the way a river grinds pebbles in a hollow. A child streaks the paste on a forearm and laughs. The first fashion show of winter, reviewed by wolves at a respectful distance. A small treasure comes out of a pouch. The sliver of an eagle's talon, polished smooth, worn at the neck on a thread of sinew. It catches firelight the way eyes do. It is not food, not shelter, not spear. It is meaning you can wear, a quirky tidbit your descendants will puzzle over and love you for. The cave itself is work. Windbreak of stone, beds scooped shallow and lined with evergreen boughs, a shelf cut into wall where points dry in the heat. You learned long ago that wood hardened at the edge of flame bites deeper, and birch bark, heated without much air, weeps a black tar that holds flint to haft as surely as a promise holds a group to one another. Your pitch pots, stone cups smudged and glossy, look like the beakers of a quiet laboratory. Somewhere an ember pops and you glance up on instinct, hand already moving the hide screen that keeps stray sparks from the roof. Fire is a friend. Friends still need boundaries. Your mind does not fit the old insult. The mainstream fact: on average, your brain matches or exceeds the volume of the modern one that will later picture you as a brute. But the cold teaches trade-offs. You are not building cathedrals or writing sonnets. You are tuning bodies, tools, and habits to an environment that grades on a curve with teeth. Your language feels low and thick in the throat, rich with gesture and timing. Anyone who thinks you cannot plan has never watched you organize a hunt that starts yesterday. Historians still argue whether certain deep cave marks in Spain, dated older than 60,000 years, belong to your hand. Whether dots and lines and hand stencils, there are your signatures or just bad lighting. But you understand the impulse either way, to leave a mark and say we were here. Death is not an abstraction. Winter makes sure of that. When it comes, you do not simply step aside. You tidy a body, flex stiff fingers around a favorite tool, tuck a bone bead near a sternum, and cover the face. Sometimes you dig a little, just enough to keep scavengers honest. Sometimes you lay stones. The reasons are as complicated as hunger and as simple as love. The cave goes quiet those nights in a way even the wind respects. In the years ahead, strangers will open such places and find your care and name it ritual or practicality, or both. You do not need the word to know the feeling. Compassion is not academic here. It is logistics. An old hunter in your group limps, a hip fused, a forearm crooked from some youthful argument with a bison. He eats with you still, laughs still, teaches still. Someone cleaned him and carried him and gave him the marrow and the softest moss when he could not rise. He lived years like that because you do not throw away people. You have never learned the habit. When storms lock the valley in white and the herds wander elsewhere, your world turns inward. You sew with bone awls and sinew thread, patching boots, tightening hood seams until only eyes look out. Your parka is not high couture, but it is bespoke in the way that matters, measured against the wind. You tell winter stories of a bear that slept through a thunderclap, of the year the river wore a necklace of ice that clinked all night, of the cousin who swore he saw lights walk along the sky, moving like animals. Someone mimes that last one badly, and the cave shakes with laughter. Even your jokes are thick-bodied. They wear fur. You aim one at yourself. With this brow ridge, who needs a hat? The children groan and love you anyway. Not everything you make is on purpose. When you use manganese dioxide to dust kindling, you notice the wood seems to catch easier, an accidental metallurgical note that millennia later will look like science. When you scrape your teeth with a sliver of bark, a toothpick groove will fossilize your dental hygiene into stone. When you chew willow for its bitter bite because your head hurts, someone watching you will remember that the bitterness helps, and the memory will outlive names for molecules. The hunt returns to the slope in cycles. Your calendar is hoof and bud and rut. You sharpen points, renew bindings, rehearse routes with a stick in ash. The ambush always begins hours before it begins, in glances and posture and the way everyone breathes at the same time. At the last moment, a sudden, ridiculous thought, How much easier this would be with weapons that fly. You smile at your own imagination. Death from a distance, what a notion. And drive the thought down, because the valley demands attention, not fantasy. Someday strangers will bring flying edges. Someday numbers will change. For now, your hands and this place agree on methods. Out beyond the ice, rumors live. Traders speak of people to the east who are not you and not the stocky cousins from the caves to the west. Tall, strong, wanderers of high plateaus and dark forests, ghosts who leave almost nothing behind but themselves. The fire pops again, and a spark climbs, hesitates, goes out. You look into the black rock ceiling and see maps where no maps exist. Tracks where only smoke has walked. Far away, a sister lineage keeps its own embers breathing through long winters. The steppe between you is wide, but winter is patient. Paths cross when time says so. In the morning, the wind will have new teeth. You will answer with the same old competence: plan, creep, spring, share, mend, sing. The glacier on the horizon glows again, and you feel not fear, not pride, but a rightness. This body, this valley, this way of being human, built for cold. Still, as you bank the coals and pull the hide across the cave mouth, a thought moves at the edge of awareness like a pale animal at dusk. Somewhere, a cousin you have never seen is waking in another kind of winter. The cave mouth frames the night like a doorway into weather. Wind combs the pines on the Altai slope. Sparks wander up from your fire and think about becoming stars, then change their minds. You warm your hands and listen to stone answer the heat with tiny ticks, a clock that only keeps mountain time. You are Denisovan, broad-shouldered, sure-footed in thin air, and you do not know that millennia from now the world will try to fit you into a single fingertip. You flex the little finger of your left hand because it aches in the cold. Far in the future, a bone like that, found in this very cave, will give up a secret. In 2010, scientists sequenced DNA from a tiny finger bone at Denisova Cave and revealed a previously unknown branch of humanity. Your branch, sister to Neanderthals, and separate for hundreds of thousands of years. From almost nothing, a genome speaks. From a whisper, a people appear. That's the mainstream fact that anchors this night. Fire throws a steady amber on the wall. A child sleeps with one cheek in the curve of a dog's back. A woman pinches birch bark to coax a new flame like she's telling it a joke it already knows. Birch pitch glistens black on a spear haft. A flake's edge flashes and then behaves. Outside, the steppe leans toward the mountains, and the mountains lean toward the sky. You move comfortably between them. High valleys do not scold your lungs the way they will scold strangers later. Your range is not a dot on a map. It is a constellation. The story later written in genomes only betrays what your feet already know. You wander Asia in quiet abundance. From the blue-white Altai to forests dense enough to teach silence. From winter grasslands to islands where rivers forget which way to run. Far to the south and east, the echo of your people will ring loudest in the bodies of future Melanesians and the highlands of Papua New Guinea and Australia. The echo runs softer in East and South Asia, but it is there, a hum beneath louder songs. Winter teaches a lesson you already half know. Breath is a tool. You pace a ridge until the air thins to a flavor only mountain goats usually taste. You do not stumble. You do not curse the sky. Somewhere in the alphabet soup of your descendants' genes, a letter swap in a regulator of oxygen use, handed on from people like you, will give future Tibetans an everyday calm at altitude that would make lowlanders see stars at noon. Gifts travel best when the givers don't even know they're wrapping them. By the hearth you work a bow drill with a rhythm that would make a drummer nod. Wood over spindle, grit for bite, the string humming a small, satisfied note when it finds its groove. Chips gather at your feet. In your palm lies a piece of green stone, veined and cool, polished to a gloss that returns firelight like water. A quirky, fringe-flavored tidbit to hang near this hearth. In this cave, archaeologists will one day find a polished green bracelet with a drilled hole so clean it looks machine-made. Whether that treasure is truly yours, or wandered in later, is a delicious argument for people who enjoy arguing. Rumor travels on legs. Traders from the conifer belt arrive speaking a clipped dialect and napping cores in a way your knuckles want to imitate. Sea Edge people appear with salt in their hair and baskets woven tight as gossip. You swap obsidian, ochre, sinew, daughters, and songs. Historians still argue whether Denisovan names one people or several, whether the label is a coat hung over different shoulders across Asia, whether the ghost in the genome is a single voice or a choir, but under your feet the answer feels plural. Late in the dry season, you follow a river that gossips east and then south, until the trees fatten and the air tastes green. Birds laugh with wood-knock voices. One afternoon, your trail intersects another. They move like you, but not like you. Taller, narrower, faces light in bone, eyes busy with futures. Sapiens. Your hand rests near a spear point, the way courtesy rests near honesty. Their leader raises an open palm. You raise yours. The clearing decides nobody has to be brave today. Contact is not thunder, it is weather. The first day you trade looks and leave. The second day you trade fish for stone and leave. By the end of the first moon, you are trading information about where the river pretends to fork and where it actually does. Their points are smaller, more numerous. Yours hit harder and last longer. They carry bone needles fine enough to teach skin to become clothing that fits. The Pleistocene version of tailored, not off the rack. You show them how to read a slope for avalanche scars, and where the wind lays dry sticks after rain. Your fire is the original social media. Everything gathers around it and overshares. On a rain-stopped afternoon, you notice two teenagers from the different camps singing the same song with different mouths. You pretend not to notice. The future will. Decades from this clearing, a girl will be born in a cave far to the north, with a Neanderthal mother and a Denisovan father. Direct proof that the branches of your family are hedges, not fences. She lives long enough to leave a handful of cells in the dirt. The dirt remembers, so will the genome readers. You teach and you learn. You trade a spear shaft that hums in the hand for a necklace made of seeds hard as teeth. They show a fish weir that catches dinner while you nap. Cheating you can get used to. Someone salts meat over smoke, and the camp smells like home and hunger at the same time. You copy one of their finely barbed bird points and feel a private, satisfied click when it works. They copy one of your thick end scrapers and finish a stubborn hide in half the time. Civilization, it turns out, is just an agreement to keep swapping good ideas. At dawn, the dogs negotiate borders with their tails, while people do the same with glances. You shoulder a pack that is half toolkit, half optimism. Carry on. A perfect river cobble, and far too many plans. Fog gathers in the understory, and you part it with your hands, gifts packed in both directions. In your blood, though you cannot know it, threads of other people move in and make themselves at home, bringing hints for immune defenses and small edits that will help strangers survive plagues you will never meet. Not every story squares its corners. Historians still argue whether the three-rooted molar common in some of today's Asian and Native American mouths is a Denisovan gift or a case of evolution inventing the same tooth twice. They argue, too, over that green bracelet, whether it sits naturally in your toolkit or wandered in long after your embers cooled. Far from here on the Tibetan plateau, a thick old jaw found in a monastery will one day be identified as one of yours, not by DNA, but by the ancient proteins locked in its bone. Even without a face, the body keeps receipts. Night climbs the ridge, sparks go up, the sky says nothing. The steppe will empty and fill and empty again. Jungles will move in subtle tides. Coastlines will redraw the borders of memory. Your name will become a placeholder for the work of many hands who never knew they were famous. You bank the fire, rub resin from your knuckles, and listen to the mountain breathe. Before the next moon, your trail will pull you south toward islands where everything obeys its own rules, where elephants shrink, rats get confident, and small people move like shadows under leaves. You whistle the dog, tap the coals into a safe glow, and shoulder the world that waits beyond the trees. The jungle roof lowers until sky becomes a rumor, and the leaves are so big you could use one as a blanket if the ants would sign a lease. Everything here is oversized except you. Your head just brushes the hanging roots. Your feet step neatly through the vines where taller cousins would tangle and swear. You are Homo floresiensis on the island of Flores, small in the way a key is small, perfectly built for the lock it must turn. Heat sits on your shoulders like a friendly cat. You move under screw pines and figs in single file, knees bent, toes finding purchase on slick, red soil. On the path ahead, a rat the size of a house cat sniffs the air and decides you are not a problem worth solving. A stork with a skull like a hammer, one of those giant marabou relatives that once stalks these forests, lifts slow wings and proves that silence can be huge. The island is a museum of opposite rules. Elephants come in pygmy editions, birds arrive in XXL, lizards think like crocodiles. This is island biogeography at work, the island rule, the way isolation edits bodies. Large animals shrink to fit the budget of limited resources. Small ones get bold and grow. The island has a sense of humor, and you fit the punchline. You catch your reflection in a stream's dark glass, about 1 meter tall, 3 and a bit feet, with a body built for scrambling and a head no bigger than a grapefruit. Your cranial vault is small by Sapiens standards, closer in capacity to a chimp's, but the measure that matters is cleverness per kilogram. Hands sure, eyes busy. Your face, foreshortened a little, looks like mischief and focus had a child. You adjust the twist of fiber at your waist and check the point of your short wooden spear, the tip fire-hardened the way the Neanderthals would nod at, edges touched up with flakes you struck from a volcanic cobble this morning. Your toolkit is compact, simple core and flake technology, but don't let the minimalism fool you. Efficiency is a design language. The mainstream fact lives in a cave behind you in the limestone flank, Liangbua, where far in the future archaeologists open a sediment page and read your bones. Discovered in 2003, a diminutive hominin, roughly 1 meter tall, with wrist and foot bones that say, ancient lineage. not sick modern. The dates move as the science improves, but the current reading puts your skeletal story around 160,000 years ago, with hearths and tools continuing in the cave's layers to about 50,000 years. The first headlines will call you Hobbit and argue microcephaly. The layers, stubborn as stone, will answer that your proportions are consistent, your anatomy coherent, your presence real. You drop into a crouch as the forest thins to a muddy crossing. In the distance, the undergrowth shivers with a particular rhythm, the sound of small trunks pushed aside by something not small. Stegodon, the island dwarf elephant, no larger than a modern cow, but all legacy, all temper. You sign with your hand, 2 fingers like tusks, a downward chop for dip, the little circle for wait until the knee-deep patch. Your band, 8 souls and 2 children old enough to carry gossip, melts into positions practiced so many seasons they feel like muscle memory left by older hands. You are snack-sized in a place with beaks and teeth, so you make the first move or you become the menu. The plan is not a romance with heroism. It is arithmetic. 2 of you ease downwind to spook the animal toward the softer ground, where its weight becomes an argument with physics. Another pair readies long, sharpened stakes to plant and lever when needed. You hold your short spear close to the point to jab and skip, not commit, the way your elders taught you when your reach matched a sapling's. The stegodon emerges, a shaggy flank, a head like a blunt boat's prow, eyes old with a patience that could turn ugly. It tests the mud. You show yourself a beat too soon on purpose and become an irritating idea. It lunges at you. Then the ground leans hard and holds. Your cousins wedge stakes under the ribcage to keep the body from rolling. You dart in, aim for the armpit where hide thins, and your spear says what needs saying. The work is quick and respectful. A life ends, a week begins. Back at the shelter, a lean overhang where roots drink air, fire does the quiet miracle you already trust. Your external stomach, breaking tough fibers, killing what should not hitch a ride, unlocking calories that brains love. The smell turns from hot metal to sweet fat. You remember Java's caramel sap, suddenness, and grin. The world repeats good ideas. The children watch your hands as you tease marrow with a flake, trade the chewy bits for help plucking bristles, and tuck a few choice shards into a leaf to keep for tomorrow's scraping. Competence is still the lullaby. Around the coals, someone sets down a stone unlike the others. A dense, green pebble, smoothed by thumb wars and water. Its hole is clean and central, and it glows when it catches firelight. You grin at the memory of a traveler's tale about a polished green bracelet discovered in a cave, not far in spirit from here, drilled so neatly that future arguments will lean over it with magnifiers and opinions. Whether that treasure is truly yours or a cousin's is not your problem tonight. It's a lovely fringe-flavored tidbit to hang by the fire and let joy warm its hands. The island keeps a bestiary of lessons. Komodo dragons patrol the margins with the silent authority of old nobility. You learn to step wide around their gossiping tracks and give big logs a kick before sitting, because sometimes logs blink. The giant storks wait like judges, sometimes scavenging your leftovers, sometimes failing to mind their manners around infants. You solve that with watch rotations and the sudden clarity of a thrown stick. Fruit falls in seasons. Caves breathe cool when the noon heat pretends to be permanent. You map shade as carefully as water and learn which palms barter starch for labor. The world beyond the surf might as well be another star. You are separated by narrow seas that behave like walls when your boats are the width of a tree. Yet you own the forest the way the forest owns you, not as property, but as fluency. You can move in understory where tall people would leave confessions of clumsiness. You can stalk through pandanus roots the way water does. A little body can carry a big idea. Historians still argue whether your small stature is the island's edit of Homo erectus, a textbook case of dwarfism, or the echo of something even older, a more primitive ancestor that rafted here on storm-tossed mats of vegetation long before islands had names. They also argue when your fires finally dim, whether strangers from the west, sapiens with long steps and longer stories, ever looked you in the eyes at Liangbua, or arrived only to find your footprints fading. Science enjoys a good debate. The jungle enjoys not caring. You keep living. At night, elders trace maps with a charred stick on the cave floor. The best nutting trees, the ridge where a spring never fails, the boulder with the friendly snake who means no harm, as long as you greet it with respect and a long stick. Someone tells a story about little people who steal food and mumble in a language like birds, ebugogo, a name that will travel into the future as folklore on Flores. You laugh and tap the storyteller's knee. We are the little people. He shrugs. Stories wear masks, he says with a smile, and the cave approves. You make a mental note. If future tourists ask, charge them 2 shells per legend. Your tools do not try to be everything. A river cobble becomes a core. Flakes bloom like petals from its skin, each with an edge that knows what to do. You tuck a handful in a woven pouch. Scalpels for plant fibers, for sinew, for shaving the points the fire has already persuaded into hardness. You do not carry a hand axe the size of a business card to impress passers-by. There are not many passers-by, but you do take pride in symmetry when a flake breaks exactly as intended. The island rewards restraint. Extravagance is heavy and breaks. Moonlight filters green and then silver through the leaves as the night cools. Bats pencil quick arcs over the stream. From the darkness beyond the ridge comes the soft scrape of a dragon's belly on dry leaves, a reminder that you are never alone in the way that keeps you honest. You listen to the forest's 3-note lullaby, chirp, drip, leaf, and your breathing falls into time. And far away, so far that the sea between might as well be a century. The African fires burn around faces like yours, but not yours. Language there sharpens hooks for tomorrow, paints bison and meaning on cave rock, ties groups together with stories that recruit thousands. While you master a world that chose small and swift, your cousins refine the invisible tool behind their eyes until it can move mountains without touching them. The jungle sleeps, the coals pulse, and the next turning of the world gathers itself behind the horizon you cannot yet see. Dawn in Africa tastes like iron and salt, like breath warmed by a hearth you can't yet see. Grass dark with dew combs your calves. A hoopoe lifts from the thorn with a soft, surprised whoop, as if morning caught it mid-thought. You walk past the sleeping embers, careful, respectful, and into a light that makes every edge glow. Something in you has changed, and the easiest way to feel it is in the way time behaves. Yesterday is not gone. It's a tool. Tomorrow is not missed. It's a hook you can hang plans on. You are Homo sapiens, and the invisible machinery behind your eyes is humming like a hive. You notice it first in conversation, because now you have conversation. Not just pointing and panting and the urgent grammar of danger, but sentences that bend and nest and return. You can say, "Don't go to the river bend tomorrow morning, because I saw a lion there yesterday." And the child who hears you understands yesterday, there, tomorrow. Somewhere in your skull, recursion, phrases inside phrases, slides into place and makes thought stackable. It feels decadent, like finding marrow in a bone you expected to be hollow. Gossip becomes a survival technology. Who is generous, who is careless, who hoards sinew, who sings to babies. The original social network has 0 ads and more moderators named Auntie than you can count. Around the fire, pronouns multiply. Names for kin expand until your little band of 30 can behave like 60, because words make absent people present. Abstracts show up as if they've always lived here. Luck, promise, debt, spirit. And because they exist in speech, they exist in behavior. You can coordinate 3 separate ambushes on different gullies, scheduled against the shadow of a slope, then meet at a landmark you've only ever described. Plans stop being sketches in ash and start being contracts. The land answers this new noise with opportunities. On a headland, the tide combs mussels from rock. Down in a sheltered cove, a line of shellfish middens grows. Plump white commas in a dark sentence of time. A mainstream fact to pocket. In South Africa's Blombos cave, people like you were processing ochre and engraving it perhaps 100,000 years ago. And by around 75,000 years ago, leaving deliberate cross-hatched designs on ochre pieces, marks that are not meat, not shelter, not spear, but symbol. In your hands today, a chunk of soft red stone feels like a seed. You grind it on a slab with fat until the paste goes silky and the air smells faintly of rain and iron. Historians still argue whether this flowering is a sudden revolution or a long braided upgrade, whether the mind catches fire in a century or smolders across many tens of thousands of years, and how much of the same wildfire lit your Neanderthal cousins too. You're happy to leave them to their journals. You have a wall that needs a line. You touch ochre to stone, and the first stroke lands with a small electric certainty. Then another. It isn't a bison yet, or a spirit, or even a handprint. It's a decision made visible. A child inhales and adds a zigzag that looks like a river that learned manners. You don't correct them. The camp holds its breath as images appear. Meaning multiplies in the pockets of the day. Your mother plucks perforated shells from a pouch and threads them in a looping rhythm that feels like speech for fingers. Shell beads, little suns polished by thumb and time, settle against skin and say, "This is us." Not just "this is me," but "this is our group." A passport you can wear. The beads catch light by the fire and become declarations that travel. Months from now, traders will recognize the pattern and remember a story told by a cousin about your people near the place that smells of kelp and warm rock. Across the dunes, a neighbor rubs red paste on forearms before the midday walk, not for beauty alone, but to keep the sun honest and the flies undecided. Ochre mixed with fat as practical sunscreen and repellent. The elders adopt it at once. Later, you notice how a little ochre blended into plant resin toughens the glue when you set stone into a wooden shaft. Points snap less, survive more. Art slips into engineering the way dawn slips into day. Even your silence changes flavor. At night, you lie under a sky busy with ancestors and find yourself building models of people in your head. What they want, what they plan, what they fear. The moderns will call it theory of mind. You call it being less surprised tomorrow. When the wind shifts, you say nothing, and still everyone adjusts, because your posture has learned to talk. Inside the cave, a few of you experiment with heat in a new way, baking dull stone until it reddens and fractures more obediently. Far to the south, at a place that will someday be called Pinnacle Point, people heat-treat silkrete to make sharper blades. The idea travels as ideas do here. A cousin of a cousin watched cousins do the red rock trick, and now your hands are trying it too. Your stories grow longer legs. You tell a child that once your grandmother's grandmother heard the hills speak and followed their humming to a spring that has never failed. The child, unblinking, asks what the hill said when it was grateful. You don't laugh. You add the detail, because it will make someone tomorrow remember to listen. Spirits creep into the narrative, not as strangers with lightning in their pockets, but as the polite names for things you must treat like kin. The river, the wind that ruins ambushes, the herd that returns if you thank it correctly. Fiction turns out to be a tool for coordinating large numbers of people. The bigger the story, the bigger the camp can be. Board meetings involve fewer tables and more dancing. You count differently now. The measure of a day is not simply full belly and warm sleep. It's whether knowledge grew. You teach a teenager how to twist cordage from plant fibers until it hums with strength, and you add a little song so the hands remember even when the mind wanders. The song travels. A month later, a stranger sings it back with a new verse about not leaving cordage near the fire unless you want to invent smoke. You accept the edit. Congratulations, you've forked your first open-source project. Once, while skirting a lagoon, you hear a chorus of clicks from the next dune and answer without thinking. Tongue on palate, percussive consonants you've tasted since childhood. The sound carries far in dry air and slices cleanly between meanings. You trade jokes across the reed bed, 3 beats and a hiss that means nice try. Later, watching strangers pass your click and breath sentences, you realize language is not one river, but many braided channels that all find the sea. It makes you generous to new mouths. The practical returns every evening. You sortie to the shore at low tide with baskets, pry limpets free, pluck mussels, slice kelp into strips like green ribbon. Fires hiss with brine. The camp smells like a storm that changed its mind. Children search the shallows for small abalone shells with neat, natural holes. Someone pockets a perfect one for a future necklace. Food from the shore pays out steady calories that land hunting can't always guarantee. The coast becomes a pantry that refills itself twice a day. Your bands spread a little farther along the cliffs each season, staying within shouting distance of kin and singing distance of memory. You sleep with the easy exhaustion of people who've made meaning all day. The embers pulse. A slow heartbeat. You're aware, as if from the next room, that your greatest invention is not a blade or a bead, but shared imagining. The ability to picture futures together and then walk toward them without tripping over one another. Fire glows at your back while your mind throws sparks you cannot yet name. Tomorrow, those sparks will harden into tools you'll set against the night, ways to push darkness back, to cook time, to carry warmth from evening to evening. For now, you roll closer to the heat, smile into the wool of your cloak, and let the hive behind your eyes hum itself quiet. Night gathers, but you sit inside a small gold circle where shadows must ask permission to enter. The fire breathes and you breathe with it. Crackle in, warmth out until your shoulders drop and your eyes learn the dance. Inside, faces loosen. A child sleeps against reed baskets. An elder nudges a coal with a stick like moving a star with one careful finger. Your ancestors first met flame as weather, lightnings left over, a gift that wandered. You make it stay. A bow drill hums, cordage sings, dust of fiber grows hot, then bright. Dry grass decides to be sunrise. The difference between finding fire and calling it is the difference between luck and skill. You treat the hearth like a living thing, fed, fenced, thanked, never trusted beyond sense. Cooking turns fire from guest to partner. Raw tubers that once fought your jaw collapse into sweetness. Sinew surrenders. Shellfish open like polite doors. Heat is your external stomach, breaking fibers, killing hitchhikers, unlocking fuel your big, busy brain demands. Mainstream fact: habitual fire and cooking boost energy gained from food and likely supported the growth of energetically expensive human brains. You taste proof in the sudden effortlessness of chewing what used to take a whole evening. The circle is also a bouncer. Smoke convinces mosquitoes to dine elsewhere. Eyes that hunted your ancestors blink at shifting light and reconsider. Predators still come, but now they pause. That pause is your margin. Inside the ring, other circles form. A story that chooses a rhythm everyone's heart can copy. A song that keeps hands twisting cordage in time. A pebble game teaching children to count past their fingers without noticing they are learning. You hold a wooden spear near the coals and turn it slowly. The skin of the wood darkens, then gleams. The point bites your thumb with new authority. Heat hardening persuades plants to agree with your intentions. Beside you, resin and ochre are stirred into a glue you can trust, less brittle, more stubborn. A trick first noticed while painting forearms to keep sun honest and flies undecided. Tomorrow on the plain, that glue will keep stone in wood when the world tries to say otherwise. Fire lets you think like an engineer. You heap brush in a gentle crescent and light the upwind edge. Smoke and noise become a moving wall that persuades skittish antelope to choose the path you already chose. At season's end, you burn old grass in narrow, cool strips so that new, sweet shoots green first at your doorstep when the rains return. The burn is mosaic, not carpet. When everything burns, nothing returns. The land answers patchwork with abundance. Not every flame wants to be friend. You keep rules. Clear a ring when the grass is plotting. Never turn your back on a coal when the wind has opinions. Bury a live ember for dawn, nested in bark dust and dry fungus. Quirky tidbit. Some people will one day carry slow coals in rolls of tinder fungus like a sleeping heart, walking days with a pocket of dawn. You already do the same. The coal rides all day like a secret that hums. Around the fire, knowledge moves as easily as smoke. A visitor from upriver stacks wet reeds into a steaming pit that tames bitter roots. Your aunt trades the shell bead knot your people favor. Someone from the dunes speaks of heating dull stone until it blushes red, then napping it like softened butter. You try it on local rock and a drab edge becomes a razor. Historians still argue whether heat-treating stone began here or there, suddenly or everywhere at once. but your hands prefer results to pedigrees. Night used to slam a door. Fire edits it into a usable room. The extra hours buy you planning and memory. Elders rehearse how the river climbs its banks when the hill cloud looks like a sleeping dog. Children reenact a hunt with sticks for gazelles and a pot for a pit. The mistakes are funny tonight and less funny tomorrow, which is the point. You study the sky now because you can finally stare up without shivering. Stories bloom brightest here. A scar on a forearm becomes a quick epic. A near miss with a leopard turns into a parable about carrying 2 spears and not falling in love with bushes. Fire doesn't make stories true. It makes them contagious. People lean in and eyes widen together. Tomorrow, when 10 of you close a crescent around a herd, you'll step like relatives who share a single pulse. Your mind loops back to family. Erectus hands that first learned to keep coals alive with dung and patience. Neanderthal kin with pitch under their nails and a winter's worth of sparks shelved in caves. The little people of Flores whose small spears carved big meals when the embers agreed. The family practiced for you. You sharpen the trick into an instrument. The bow drill becomes habit. The tinder kit is a pocket you pat the way someone later will pat for keys. By daybreak, the ash tells its soft story. Footprints like petals around the ring, the streak where a dog dragged its tail, seed husks curled like boats. You rake coals into a lidded pit. The camp smells of charcoal and last night's jokes. When you shoulder your pack, the fire comes with you, not as flame, but as method. A memory of cooked food, a plan for smoke at the right moment, a habit of gathering dry grass before you're tired. Another note glows under deep ash. Far to the west, in a cave, the future will call wonderwerk. Char and burned bone hint that hominins kept fire close roughly 1 million years ago. Later hearths dot continents by 400,000. Historians still argue whether Neanderthals and other cousins could spark flame on demand or mostly borrowed it from lightning, but either way the night learned to step back when people arrived. You kick dirt over the last bright eyes and the circle shrinks. Day lifts. The plains open like a promise. With tamed flame and a head full of plans, the horizon stops being a wall and becomes a doorway. East along the coasts, shell beads glitter like crumbs on a route you have not taken yet. Migration starts in your calves before it appears in your stories. The world is no longer only home. It is an itinerary. Shoulder the basket. Pocket the spark. The next fire waits ahead, already missing you. At the edge of the continent, the wind smells like salt and beginning. Your footprints pucker the wet sand and fill with sky. Behind you, the fire's ash cools into quiet memory. Africa glows across your shoulder with the warmth of a hearth you will always miss. In front of you, the land narrows and the sea leans in. A blue road that pretends to be a wall. Your band is small. Families, baskets, a dog that thinks every crab is personal, and the first step east feels ordinary enough to be dangerous. Big journeys often do. Why leave? Not from boredom. The savannah has opinions about entertainment. Seasons sharpen, rains shift their manners, and herds redraw the map without asking you first. The mouths around your fire have multiplied in a pleasantly chaotic way. Curiosity stirs, too, same as it always has, the itch behind the eyes that wonders what the horizon keeps to itself. Historians still argue whether your departure is a single grand exodus or a series of pulses. start, stall, start again, nudged by climate flickers, crowded valleys, or just the human habit of seeing a headland and imagining supper on the other side. East does not mean inland at first. You discover the coast is a generous teacher. It repeats itself so faithfully you can plan on it. Low tide, pantry opens. High tide, close the door and nap. Shellfish don't stampede. Kelp doesn't spook. Eggs in dunes obey the moon more than your mistakes. You find a rhythm with the shoreline that makes risk feel like math again. Later scholars will call it a coastal highway. To you it's a path with salt on it and a toll you pay in sand between your toes. Your baskets learn the shapes of mussels and limpets, your hands the trick of turning seaweed into soup that smells like hope. The first inlets are small. You wade, hem your clothes, laugh, and pretend nothing bit your ankle. Then the inlets widen until the water pulls at your knees with opinions. Rafts appear because they're simply a bundle of solutions, wood that floats, vines that hold grudges, courage shaped into planks. Even a narrow crossing is a committee decision, with grandmothers testing the lashings and toddlers volunteering to steer. The mainstream fact that will one day astonish museum goers: by roughly 65,000 years ago, people like you reached Sahul. Australia and New Guinea and Tasmania joined into one, with crossings that require open water. You don't have a word for oceanic voyage, just a collection of good excuses to try. You follow a silver string of beaches up the Red Sea, then stitch your way along the Arabian shore. Camps bloom and fade behind you, heaps of shells, a scatter of fish bones, a lost bead catching morning like a tiny sunrise. The route is forgiving, almost forgiving enough to make you careless. You learn the particular patience of waiting for low tide with an empty stomach and a bucket's worth of jokes. The dog, unimpressed by the moon, invents a howl that successfully moves no water at all. When the shore kinks into cliffs, you pass inland for a breath or two. Wadis where date palms nurse sweetness, stony plains where the wind keeps the ground honest, and return to the surf as soon as the land remembers to level. The journey is generational. Your grandmother tells a child about hippo watching on a river she last saw when her own grandmother's hair was still dark. None of you will walk the full length of the coast, you imagine, in evening talk. Imagination and lineage divide the labor. You move a valley or two each season, then stay long enough for children to learn where the best oysters hide, and for someone to carve a little animal from driftwood that has no use beyond making everyone smile. One day you will meet a stranger who knows your song, but sings it with a different joke tucked inside. You will recognize the joke as yours, long removed and well fed. On some beaches the fish come to you, silver commas that fling themselves into shallow pans when the moon lines up its arguments. On others, the water is stingy, and you knot nets from twisted plant fiber, inventing patience with your fingers. You learn to set fish traps that keep working while you nap, an efficiency so delightful it feels like cheating. A quirky tidbit you gather and pass along. Certain kelp forests cradle an entire pantry. Abalone, sea urchins, fish that forget to be afraid. A kelp highway that whispers you forward with easy calories. Whether the name waits thousands of years or not, the practice does what names always do, follows the food. The world changes under your feet, and because of them, sea level breathes with the ice, exhaling coastlines when glaciers lock water away, and inhaling them when the melt remembers its options. Beringia, the broad, cold bridge between Siberia and Alaska, will exist when sea is stingy with height. Doggerland will roll green between what one day will be France and Britain. You don't write this down. You memorize it with ankles and weather sense. Historians still argue whether your earliest crossings into Arabia happened in a humid greening that turned deserts to grass, or during harsher spells when only the coast could be trusted. On the ground, trust is a tide table and a checklist. The distances are not heroic when you chop them into seasons. 20 miles is not dramatic unless you refuse to sit down between them. You make a custom of sitting down. A journey of 10,000 miles arrives quietly, delivered by 500 generations taking the next valley and leaving room for those behind to catch up. Your souvenirs are shells and borrowed lullabies, not rocks with place names. Later, people will ask when you arrived, as if there were a single afternoon. You'll be busy looking for clams. Beyond the monsoon bend, the ocean warms and swells. Islands hang like beads from a tangled cord. Some you skip, some you keep. On one, your raft bumps a beach where the sand whines like a flute underfoot. On another, fruit bats fill the dusk like slow comets, and the night air smells like a market that forgot to close. When a crossing goes wrong, you mark the tide mark with a cairn and a song that warns the grandchildren not to argue with that current. You carry names forward instead of bodies because the names know what to do. Far up the map you cannot see, people like you will eventually walk east until the earth becomes a question mark of cold. They will step onto Beringia, a grassland wide as courage, and follow mammoth and caribou tracks across a continent that later disappears beneath the sea. From there, some will unravel south into new weather, new rivers, new problems worth solving. Historians still argue whether the first feet in the Americas arrive by an inland corridor through ice or by hugging Pacific kelp beds in boats. They argue about dates, earlier than 15,000 years ago. Much earlier. Exactly how earlier? You won't solve that this evening. You have a tide to catch. Not all currents flow east. A pulse of your kin moves north into a Mediterranean of coves and crabby headlands, then west into peninsulas that jab the sea. Others turn inland from the Levant and climb into grasslands where rivers write their difficult letters across stone. You spread like a shy, persistent stain, thin at the edges, denser where rivers knot and shellfish cooperate. Camps learn the smell of unfamiliar rocks. Songs swap place names the way beads trade owners. Everywhere you go, you leave modest signatures, long, patient middens, flakes sharp enough to shave stubborn plants, hearths whose ash keeps a memory of spruce or seaweed or dung that will someday tell a reader which fuel you trusted that year. And you are not alone beyond Africa. You don't know it yet in this section of your journey, but fires ahead belong to people who are not you, and not strangers either. In the Levant, a valley will hold two stories at the same time for a while, yours and your cousins. The coast, faithful as a friend, will carry you to their neighborhoods with fewer deserts to argue with and enough clams to keep everyone reasonable. When night returns, you pull the boats above the rack line and wedge them with driftwood. The moon turns the water into a sheet of hammered tin. Crabs write unreadable messages at the tide line. You tuck the dog's ears so the wind doesn't scold them and tilt your face to the stars. They have been a roof all your life. Tonight they feel like a map. You don't need to name them to trust them. Tomorrow the path will be another bright ribbon of sand, another curve of cliff, another inlet that behaves. You'll walk until a cove looks like camp, and a story sounds like permission. The migration isn't a march. It's a lullaby with legs. You walk out of the wind shadow of a pass and into a forest that keeps its secrets in moss. The air is colder here, resin thick, patient. Toward evening, a thread of smoke lifts from a notch 2 valleys over, too straight for lightning, too steady for brush. You taste wood on your tongue, and the little animals in your chest rearrange themselves. Not fear, not yet, but the feeling of being red. In the morning you cross a ridge of broken limestone and see them first by posture, low, solid, balanced as if the ground were a partner. Stocky figures move through birch like weather with opinions. When one turns, your breath misbehaves. The brow casts a deep shade. The face comes forward a little. The chest is a barrel built for winter. Kin, but unfamiliar enough to make your heart rehearse a retreat. You do not run. You arrange your features into the international symbol for, "Hello, we can both pretend this is fine," and keep your spear pointed at the ground the way a polite person keeps elbows off the table. Your band fans into visibility with the choreographed nonchalance of people who practiced the choreography. A Neanderthal elder glances at your hands, your feet, the seam of your cloak. You do the same. Their fur is good, tailored in a practical way, seams tight where wind finds gaps. Your cloak is decent, and you happen to be wearing 6 tiny shells you drilled with love and stubbornness. Nobody comments, which is how you know everyone noticed. Water solves the first conversation. A spring breaks out of the slope, edged in sedge and shale. You nod toward it and wait. 2 of theirs kneel. 2 of yours do. The others arrange themselves at the edges like punctuation that can change a sentence. Up close, you see the intelligence you already suspected. Eyes as busy as yours, the calm reading of a landscape as if it were written in a script both of you can sound out. Your fingers twitch toward your pouch, where a coil of cord and a few beads live. You keep them still. First contact is mostly restraint. You settle into a rhythm of parallel days. Their camp sits in the mouth of a cave that sighs out warm breath. Yours gathers under spruce, wind baffled, close to a stream that says sensible things. The first time you visit, the smell of birch pitch and boiled marrow greets you like family you haven't met yet. A child skulks behind a stalagmite and studies your hair with the solemnity of a priest. You squat by the hearth and admire a Mysterian point set neat into a stout shaft with pitch and rawhide. They pass it across without ceremony because competence wants witnesses. You trade it back for a strip of sinew and later for a glance at the little needle of bone you carry, finer than theirs, drilled with ours. Their eyes do a quick arithmetic you recognize. This will keep edges on skin in a storm. You offer the needle and a few tips for sewing a closer hood seam. They offer a chunk of flint so fine it rings when your nail touches it. Trade is not a treaty. It is a hypothesis about tomorrow. The shared fire at the edge of the clearing learns both your jokes quickly. Their laugh comes from deep in the chest, your laugh from somewhere a little higher, but the timing matches. Someone mimics the way you click a consonant and is immediately shushed by a grandmother with the kind smile that means later. You show them the trick of rubbing a hint of ochre into plant resin to toughen glue, a callback to the forearm paste you used back near the kelp, and they show you a better way to keep sparks from eating roof hides. The dogs circle with a diplomacy that would put chiefs out of business. When a gust lifts a scatter of ash, everyone leans in at once, and every hand does the same thing, which is how you know the family resemblance goes beyond bone. Not every encounter is a chorus. Some days both camps choose separate trails to the same herd and spend the afternoon pretending surprise when you see each other in the same ravine. A misread gesture can turn a slope ugly. You build a habit of exaggerated clarity, hands wide and empty, movements like slow speech. You rehearse your nicest nod, the humble head tilt that translates roughly as, "Please don't throw me into the ravine." They answer with the small head lift that means, "We were not planning to." You all keep your promises, which is why tomorrow still exists. A mainstream fact to pocket inside your cloak. If your ancestry is from outside Africa, you carry Neanderthal DNA in your cells, usually about 1 to 2%. That inheritance is a record of nights like this stretched over millennia. Some tender, some transactional, all human. Those fragments influence hair and skin and immune defenses, and even how your body notices daylight. A few will make cold bite less hard, or mornings arrive with different enthusiasm. Your blood is a ledger that remembers better than stories do. Their stories add details to your map. A river with teeth, meaning ice, is no good for 3 moons. A cliff overhang has a way of dropping surprises if you don't sing to it first. A bear that lives near the alder grove hates the smell of crushed juniper. Yours add the coastal pantry trick and the looped cordage song. They whistle it once and it sticks. Around the coals, you learn a quirky tidbit that delights your coastal heart. Down on a distant Italian shore, cousins of theirs harvest thick shells from the shallows and rasp the edges into scrapers, sometimes diving for them when the sea forgets to be calm. It's such an ordinary, magnificent picture that you can feel salt on your teeth just hearing it. The exchange is not just goods, it's tempo. You favor planning from a long way out, arcs of movement, coordinated crescents, edges light and numerous. They favor the ambush that begins underfoot, close, explosive, body to body, spears driven rather than thrown. The difference is not a judgment, it is a physics problem, with 2 correct answers, each tuned to a different winter. A few evenings of shared roasting narrows the gap. You teach a teenager from their camp to throw a light dart with a grooved stick you've started carving, a lever for your arm that sends wood farther than your shoulder thinks it should. They teach your cousin to read horse tracks like a calendar, and to listen for the hollow drum under crusted snow that means, "Don't step there if you like ankles." Historians still argue whether certain toolkits, like the Châtelperronian, with its slim blades and ornaments, are Neanderthal hands adopting your methods, your hands imitating theirs, or 2 branches inventing similar solutions to similar problems. They argue, too, whether first meetings skewed toward conflict or cooperation, and how quickly one of you began to replace the other, in particular valleys. From your place by the fire, the answer is untidier. In one gorge, avoidance. In the next, shared ash. In the next, blood on snow, and a song that says, "Don't go there for a while." The pattern is local, the way weather is local. Weeks slide into seasons. A girl in your camp plaits her hair with a thin strip of leather, and a Neanderthal boy watches the motion as if the braid were a spell. You pretend you didn't notice, then teach him. He pretends he hasn't practiced, then arrives 2 days later with a tidy seam on his hood that looks suspiciously like your aunt's work. In a place where winter makes every mouth an expense, generosity is a bet you place on the future. Some of those bets grow legs. Babies born a few winters from now will carry eyes that remind both camps of cousins. The camps will move, the hearths will go cold, but the children will keep walking. Word comes from the east, passed from camp to camp like a warm coal cupped in both hands. Tall people with faces different from both of yours are moving along the shadow of a high plateau. They travel comfortably where air thins. When your band finally threads a valley in that direction, you meet them. The Denisovan wanderers from the mountains, good at altitude, good at distance, good at the quiet most of us avoid. You trade as if you've always planned to. Something they carry will later help people on the roof of the world live as if lungs had extra corners. You carry songs, hooks for catching fish, rumors of a coastline that gives more than it asks. Evenings lengthen, then nap back as the year turns. Your darts fly a little farther now. Your sewing is cleaner and your hood doesn't leak wind. Their ambushes feel less like collisions and more like agreements with the slope. The shared fire burns lower as camps pull apart for winter roots. No breakup, just gravity. When you shoulder your tools, the spear in your hand is still thick, still familiar, but the lighter dart beside it keeps catching your eye. A future disguised as a stick. Somewhere ahead, that quiet lever will be refined into a habit, and the habit into an advantage. Tomorrow's valley will measure distances differently because of a handful of ideas you are now willing to carry. Night thins. Frost clicks in the reeds. You stand, thank the ground with a touch. You always do, and turn toward the path that knows your feet. Behind you, a low wave of hands. Before you, a ridge that promises wind with teeth. You walk knowing now that family is larger than you were told, and that meetings can change bodies as surely as winters do. You also walk with an inconvenient suspicion. The next chapter will hinge not on who is stronger up close, but on who can reach without being reached. You stand at the edge of a clearing where frost peels from grass like thin paint. A bison crops the far side, the steam of its breath rising in calm balloons. In your palm is not a heavy shove-it-and-hope spear, but a long, light dart resting in a grooved piece of wood with a little hook at the end. You raise the lever and feel the geometry wake up in your shoulder. The stick becomes an extra forearm. Your hand is suddenly better than it has any right to be. You exhale, and the dart leaves with a whisper that feels like a decision. It lands far beyond the reach of your old throws. Distance turns into safety. The Neanderthal method, close, fast, brave as winter, is still a good answer, but you are busy changing the question. Up close is where ribs break and hooves write warnings into bone. From here, your heart gets to keep all its blood. You practice again, correcting what the air says you did wrong, and the dart stitches the cold with a neat line. Someone behind you whoops softly. The dog approves even though it has no idea what physics is. The lever, an atlatl though you don't name it, is a simple trick with radical manners. A hook on the end cradles the dart's butt. A flick of your wrist turns into a long arc, and the long arc becomes speed. Fletching keeps the dart honest in flight, and a slim stone point, barbed if you had the patience, does the subtle work on impact. A mainstream fact worth tucking into your quiver. Archaeological evidence for spear throwers shows up clearly by around 20,000 years ago in parts of Europe, and likely earlier in other regions. Wherever they appear, they multiply reach and power with a few ounces of wood. Historians still argue whether earlier stone tips in Africa and Asia rode true on thrown spears, light javelins, or full-blown dart and thrower systems. But the logic of leverage is already in your hands. You do not abandon the old ways, you renovate them. An ambush still begins underfoot. The wind still matters, terrain still has opinions. But now the first act can open at 40 paces. That small revision ripples outward. A hunt that used to require 6 bodies in harm's way can now be done with 3 close and 3 far, and one of the far can be you on a day when your knee resents last week's enthusiasm. More of you come home with the same number of dinners. The valley notices. The bow follows the lever the way a thought sometimes follows a joke. A slender stave, a string that hums when you pluck it. A tiny shaft fletched like a dart's quick child. Together they make distance into rhythm. You do not need the vocabulary for force to understand the pleasure of an arrow that goes where your eyes were thinking. There's a delicious argument you hear by other fires. Historians still argue whether the earliest shafted points in southern Africa were arrowheads or just very neat spear tips. Either way, by later Pleistocene nights, the bow becomes ordinary enough that children brag about bruised forearms. You rub your own wrist, smile, and claim you were testing the string. Everyone believes you, because they like you. Technology does what good stories do. It includes. A heavy thrusting spear insists on youth and big shoulders. A lever and a bow make room for steady hands and good eyes. For people with strong backs but careful knees, for quick learners and patient breathers. Grandmothers who taught you where the wind likes to hide now stand 30 paces off and place darts like punctuation. Teenagers who can't yet grow beards thread needles through hide and invent jackets that make winter less of a personality test. The camp stops pretending that only one kind of body solves problems. Clothing stops being an argument with scraps and becomes a tailored sentence. You punch holes with awls and sew with bone needles so neatly that wind looks for other work. A needle from far-off Denisova will sit in cave sediment for 50,000 years and still hold the line of what a small tool can do. Parkas hug wrists, hoods meet cheeks, boots gain soles that know ice, and socks that tell a better bedtime story than frostbite. You listen to storms from the comfortable side of them and feel a private, smug little warmth where modesty lives. Edges evolve too. Microblades, little slivers struck from carefully prepared cores, slide into wooden or antler slots like teeth, making a composite edge you can repair one chip at a time. Resin mixed with ochre and a whisper of beeswax makes a glue that shrugs at cold and laughs at wet. You taught yourself the ochre trick back on the coast while trying to keep sun honest and flies undecided. Now your glue remembers the lesson every time a point hits bone. The rest of your toolkit follows the logic of many small, smart things beat one big, dumb thing. Nets woven from twisted plant fibers turn air into a wall for fish and birds. The weir woven into the river does its job while you nap, which feels suspiciously like cheating and therefore delicious. Snares and deadfalls multiply your presence through small patience. Fire becomes technique, not just comfort. A crescent of smoke walks timid animals where your arcs want them, and cool burns in the dry season green the right patches at the right time. Someone begins to keep a quiet ledger of which mosaic burns invite which grazers. The grass reads it perfectly. A quirky tidbit glides into camp tied to a traveling rumor. In far-off lands generations from now, some folks will lash carved butterfly-shaped stones to their spear throwers. Banner stones, the future will call them. Maybe to steady the throw, maybe to hush the dart's hiss, maybe because good hunters like to carry beautiful physics. You turn a stone in your palm and feel extravagance try to talk you into itself. You set it down and pick up your scraper. There's meat to finish. The numbers you live inside begin to move. Fewer hunters bleed. More babies see 3 winters. Fewer skilled hands are lost to ribs and hooves. A camp that might have been 20 grows to 25 without feeling like a crowd. 25 can spare a few for longer scouting, for a day spent shaping bone into needles with absurdly fine eyes, for a little theater at night that teaches the children not to stand downwind of a nervous herd. You have time to make things slightly better than strictly necessary, and slightly better than strictly necessary turns out to be the ratchet that won't unwind. Your weapon's geometry changes the geometry of the hunt. A crescent of people can start farther apart. The surprise can land earlier, with more room to correct mistakes. You can drop a wounded animal with a second arrow before the ground has explained its sharp lessons to your ankles. Meat returns cleaner, with fewer broken tools embedded, and fewer stories about how you almost got very famous very briefly. Someone jokes that the gods invented distance so humans could keep their teeth. The gods do not contradict this. The differences between you and your cousins sharpen. Neanderthal spears, stout and sure, still do excellent work at 10 steps. Your darts and arrows whisper at 40 and 50. Their winter clothes hold. Yours seal. Their groups move like a single, tight muscle. Yours spread pressure lightly and recover fast. None of this makes one of you better in a way that flattery could live with, but it does make your camps grow where theirs hold steady. The map absorbs that math. You notice a social side effect that feels small and isn't. When anyone can contribute a safe, accurate shot, courage stops being a monopoly. Praise spreads. Status finds more perches. Advice comes from more mouths. Arguments get smarter because the room is bigger. A grandmother's prediction about wind at the ravine takes its seat beside a young hunter's eye for ailing reindeer and a child's new knot that saves time in the cold. The hunt becomes a seminar with outcomes you can eat. Not everything new is yours alone. Historians still argue whether your cousins adopt parts of your toolkit, invent their own in parallel, or teach you tricks you'll later forget to footnote. In some valleys, slender blades and ornaments bloom in Neanderthal layers. In others, your camps lift habits from theirs, especially where ice has strong opinions about insulation. On the ground, it feels like the old way ideas move, from whoever tried it first to whoever watched closely, and then to whoever had a better idea after that. You sit at evening with the lever across your knees, thumb rubbing the little hook smooth. The fire remembers a dozen hunts in the way it smells. You think about how a stick and a string, a small upgrade in leverage, a loop of tendon dried into music, can tilt the future. Far ahead, this slant becomes more than a hunting edge. It becomes population curves and quiet valleys, roots widening where your feet pass, roots going dim where others once shone. You are not plotting anyone's disappearance. You are solving for dinner. But solutions accumulate. When the bison finally notices you and wheels away, it is already inside 3 arcs you drew at breakfast. 2 arrows rise, 1 dart hums, and the clearing fills with orderly urgency. No rib breaks, no ankle finds a hole. The animal falls where the slope is polite. You thank it, because you always do, and you carry meat into a camp with more hands than last winter. You bank the coals and listen to the night do its slow arithmetic. With better tools, tighter seams, and hunts measured in yards instead of bruises, your people will swell. The landscape can carry only so many stories. Where your arcs grow, some others will thin. You do not celebrate that. You barely notice it this year. But the map will notice. And tomorrow, when you lift the lever and the bow again, the next chapter begins to write itself in a script of safe distances. You stand above a valley that used to speak in familiar voices. The cave mouths are dark now, the wind moving in and out like a caretaker doing the last check. You find a Mysterian point in the grass. Flint worked from a prepared core, the edges still honest, and turn it in your palm until the sun climbs its facets. It belongs to hands like the ones that once laughed across the shared fire, the people who taught you to read snow like a schedule and to keep pitch off your hair. The silence that remains is not empty. It's heavy. You feel it in your ribs the way you feel a room after a song ends. The world is one voice quieter. They do not vanish in a single winter. It's a long, granular fade. One band here, a family there, like embers going out across a wide hearth. In some valleys, the last smoke trails away before you arrive. In others, you see their footprints soften beside yours for a few seasons and then stop. Historians still argue whether the decline is mostly climate's doing, mostly your doing, mostly bad luck, or the arithmetic of several small pressures that arrive together and won't take turns. On the ground, it looks like too many hard years in a row. Competition is the polite word people use when they don't want to say hunger. Your ways push from a safer distance now. Lever and bow, darts that hum past 40 paces, jackets that don't leak arguments, boots that make negotiations with ice brief. A hunt that used to bruise 6 bodies now spares 4. Fewer of you limp home, more of you live long enough to teach. The population ratchet clicks, and ratchets are not famous for mercy. The same herds that fed your cousins feed you from farther away and feed more of you. Where the map fit 2 ways of being human, one begins to crowd. The weather helps no one who prefers stability. Ice breathes, then coughs. The wind puts on and takes off winter like a bored stagehand. Dansgaard Weschke warmings, sudden cold snaps, names the future will use for the mood swings you feel as whiplash. Neanderthal bodies shine in deep freeze, but the script keeps changing. Forests surge where open steppe used to be. Reindeer roots forget themselves. Small game fills the edges where large used to anchor the menu. Flexibility, not just strength, pays the bills. Your gear and gossip networks let you pivot. Their tight, close-quarters hunting solves the old problems perfectly, and therefore has fewer handles for the new ones. It's not a flaw, it's the price of mastery. Another pressure arrives, invisible and rude. When strangers meet, so do their parasites. Your ancestors carried tropical hitchhikers out of Africa. Your cousins carry winter-tuned ones from the north. Nobody filed paperwork about immunity. Historians still argue whether disease plays a decisive role or a supporting one. But in small, scattered bands, even a modest plague writes big headlines. A winter with fewer hunters and a spring with fewer infants can be recovered from. 2 such years test mathematics. Sometimes the line doesn't end. It dissolves. That point in your pocket is a souvenir from neighbors who are also ancestors. If your story traces outside Africa, you carry 1 to 2% of their genome, fragments that tug on hair and skin and daylight and defense. Absorption is a gentle word for it. People mixed, children were kept, grandchildren kept walking, and the small signal spread into a larger one until it became a hum under louder music. In that sense, they do not disappear. They blur. But blurring is cold comfort to a valley whose jokes you can't hear anymore. You picture a last winter in a place that juts into the sea, a peninsula the future will call Gibraltar. Caves are there. Look east across a water that throws weather at the cliffs and seals blinking in the swash. In one such cave, a small clan keeps a hearth going because that is what you do when the world tries to tell you you're finished. Shells steam in a dung-fueled oven. The air smells like salt and old fish, and a sweet note of burned resin. An elder with a careful mouth eases a splinter between aching teeth. Neanderthal toothpick grooves will fossilize such small mercies, and tells a child to listen for the sea's change of mind. The child yawns and draws a line in ash, the way children everywhere do when they are told to pay attention. Food shifts with the map. Where the big herds thin, your cousins lean into rabbits and birds and shellfish. With a competence nobody bothered to expect from them until very recently. They prune raptor wings for feathers, crack limpets with a rhythm you could dance to, and look out across a low tide the way you look across a library. There, and there. The mainstream fact you carry out of this dark. By about 40,000 years ago in most of Europe, and not so long after in the last holdouts, the layers stop carrying bones that look like theirs. The dates wobble by valley and method, but the silhouette of the story holds. When you stand in these caves later, you will see their soot and sometimes their handprints, and then the ash will change flavor. A quirky tidbit travels from a beach far north of here, at a site the future will call Le Roselle in Normandy. Dozens upon dozens of footprints pressed into old sand, many of them small, painting a picture of groups heavy with children and teenagers. It is a lovely, ordinary, devastating detail. A people composed not just of heroes and hunts, but of the bustle of youth, of tiny heels learning the grammar of ground. When you think of the last clan, remember that picture too. Not just an elder polishing a point, but a toddler deciding to jump in the same spot twice because it makes a fun sound. The Fade has no villain you can point to without pointing at the weather, the calendar, and your own good luck. Small populations are brittle. A bad run of seasons can turn a patchwork of bands into isolated families, and isolated families into quiet. Inbreeding sneaks in not as scandal, but as arithmetic. A broken leg that would once have been carried now cannot be. You've seen versions of this story in Antelope and in Villages, Dignities and Tragedies scale. You keep their lessons because you are not foolish. Pitch still gets under your nails when you bind flint to wood. You still use the shoulder twitch they taught you to start a charge, and the careful scan they taught you to end one. On cold nights, you catch yourself sewing a hood seam the way their aunt showed you by a cave fire. Double stitch at the edge to keep the wind undecided. When the dog refuses to enter a dark hole, you take the hint. You learned that from a Neanderthal grandfather with a scar that meant trust the dog. Your body carries pieces of theirs. Your toolkit does too. It is a strange comfort and a real one. You stumble once on a last kind of evidence that never makes it into tidy theories. On a ledge above a vanished river, a cache of perfect points sits under a flat stone, as if the maker planned to return after the storm. The storm outlived the plan. You pick one up and it seats itself in your hand with the confident click of competence meeting competence. For a heartbeat you feel watched, not by ghosts, but by standards. You put the point back and cover it again because there are some conversations you don't interrupt. Historians still argue whether your cousins left any late, scattered refuges beyond the famous ones, whether the Iberian coast or pockets of the Caucasus held embers longer than we think. They argue whether the Châtelperronian ornaments are their invention, your influence, or a braid of both. They argue how quickly your maps replaced theirs. You listen with half an ear. Out here, you read outcomes, where your darts whisper, where their spears don't. The wind comes up from the sea, carrying salt and something like apology. When you descend to the empty cave and set a small, respectful fire, the walls take the light and give back old soot. You sit a moment and warm your hands, then bank the coals and step out. Above the tide line, driftwood stacks itself into a suggestion of later. You shoulder your kit and follow the shore. Ahead lies a different kind of hush. Not the absence of a cousin, but the absence of titans. As your numbers swell and your reach lengthens, the great beasts that once walked like weather will begin to thin. You are not hunting an ending. You are solving for dinner. But solutions lately have consequences with long shadows. You climb the headland and the world opens. The sea steel blue. The land green where it used to be tawny. The sky doing its patient job. Somewhere behind you, a cave holds a perfect point under a flat stone. Somewhere ahead, a mammoth scratches its flank on a rock it has used for generations, unaware that the arithmetic of your camp will soon touch even that rhythm. You walk on, quieter than you were yesterday, carrying another people's eats, in the same pouch as your glue, your needles, and the little songs that keep everyone in time. The continent feels young under your feet, like a room nobody has lived in yet. Grass bends in unfamiliar dialects. Birds with new grammar shout at the sun. And everywhere, tracks declare that the locals have never learned the shape of you. A mastodon raises its head from willow brows and blinks as if your 2 legs are a clerical error. A short-faced bear owns the wind as if it invented it. Camels move across the plain where, in your old stories, camels never should be. Giant beavers leave chisel scars on cottonwoods. If one slaps the water, it sounds less like a warning and more like a door closing. The world has not met you. That is the world's mistake. A pattern begins wherever your camps learn a new coast or a new grassland, and it repeats with a stubborn rhythm. In Australia, soon after people arrive, the giants, Diprotodon, thunder lizards that are really thunder wombats, fade from the firelight. In the Americas, after your kin thread Beringia and unspool south, the big list shortens in a hurry. Mammoths and mastodons, American lions and saber-tooths, ground sloths tall as upstairs, horses and camels and dire wolves. The mainstream fact sits heavy. By the end of the Pleistocene, roughly 3/4 of North America's large mammal genera are gone. Climate is breathing hard, yes, but you are here now with darts and arrows and a population curve shaped like confidence. You do not call it overkill. You call it breakfast, then winter, then a good year. But the method is precise and learned. A mammoth hunt is not a charge with courage. It is a semester in applied patience. For 3 days you track a lone bull that left the herd. Older, heavier, dangerous without being organized. You learn where his feet sink a little deeper. You mark a boggy arm of river with willow wands. You map wind like a jealous cartographer. At dawn, you light a quiet line of brush and make the world seem like a suggestion the mammoth wants to refuse. The big animal chooses the path you built for him, and the marsh agrees. From the safety your new tools buy, darts leave hands in a tidy cadence, fluted stone points, thin and wicked, shaped to channel stress away from breakage, hide themselves in ribs and lungs. The animal lies down as if to consider something and does not rise. Later, at another valley, the lesson goes messy because lessons do. A bull wheels, a tusk kisses a tree you loved a moment ago. The ground argues back. But a distance turns disaster into a story you can tell without limping. You thank the fallen with the same old words. Quiet, simple, as useful as knots. And your band turns an impossible mountain of animal into a week of work. Bone becomes awls and wedges, Hide becomes roofs and coats, tendons sing themselves into strings, and fat burns blue in lamps until the cave smells like good fortune. The ground sloth requires a different approach. Up close, it is all hammock shoulders and puzzled dignity. When anger arrives, so do scythes for claws. You read its calendar. When it feeds, where it sleeps in shade so regular you could set water by it, and choose the soft ground and the narrow. Your darts aim for the armpit and the belly seam. Your best runner plays the part of a rude idea and stays just beyond a swipe. When the animal finally stills, you discover its hide is less like leather and more like armored landscaping. Bony plates stitched into skin. You find the gaps, because that is what you do, and then you learn to turn plates into shingles for a windbreak. A quirky tidbit to sweeten a hard day. Down in the south, there are cousins of this beast so plated and round that a person could hide behind the shell like a traveling wall. Some even swing tail clubs. Nature adores accessorizing. On other days, the prey is smaller, the arithmetic easier, and the cumulative effect the same. Horses that never learned you were trouble miss the first lessons. Camels watch you with large, gentle eyes that should have made them immortal and did not. Your nets and weirs keep teaching the river to give after you fall asleep, which still feels mildly illegal. Deadfalls and snares multiply you without asking for more knees. Fire persuades grazers to take the paths you set, and persuades new green to appear where you want it when the rains behave. Everything looks like competence because it is. You keep a place in your pouch for luck, and another for memory. Luck is the weather that does not turn. Memory is a point fluted so cleanly you almost hate to use it. You set one of those under your tongue while you work, because saliva helps the hafting hide tighten as it dries. A small private trick you learned 3 winters ago from a traveler with good hands and worse singing. On one mastodon rib, the stone sticks as if it were born there. When you later find a different rib with a shard embedded that looks old, you press your thumb against it and feel for a heartbeat the weight of a stranger's good day frozen into bone. The land keeps receipts in odd places. Historians still argue whether the extinctions lean most on your shoulders or on the weather's. Climate flickers at the end of the Pleistocene are not polite. Cold snaps that bite, warm spells that unhouse species, the younger dryers slamming winter back down like a bowl dropped into place. Some argue that firestorms from an extraterrestrial event dusted the sky and tipped ecosystems. Others find charcoal where there's always charcoal and ask for better proof. Still others point out that Africa and Southern Asia keep their titans precisely because they had time to learn you, while Australia and the Americas did not. On the ground, the debate is a sky conversation. Your legs are busy solving dinner. A callback hums under your new habits. Distance tools include more of your camp. Elders who taught you to harden spear tips in last night's coals now stand 40 paces out and place arrows as calmly as weather. Teenagers whose wrists are still auditioning for adulthood carry light darts to good effect. The work becomes safer, and safety breeds numbers, and numbers breed more fires on more headlands. You do not conquer, you spread. The map answers with fewer tasks. Sometimes, tracking through a willow bottom, you startle at a shape that the mind insists is a boulder until it remembers that boulders don't have hair. You stop and listen. The animal blows a breath through its nose that blooms into a cloud and says it doesn't know your kind. You change that knowledge. The feeling that follows is complicated and honest. You wish the world had infinite herds, and that children could always be fed without arguments. And you also know that tools are promises, and you are required to keep yours. At night, stories around the fire try to hold the vanishing. Someone who walked far south speaks of glyptodont shells shining pale under moon, like overturned boats. Someone who hunted far north mimes an antlered shadow that blotted the stars. A visitor from the plains draws a quick lion in ash, longer than any you knew back home, with a stride that measured the ground like a surveyor. Jokes lean in to ease the knot in the room. If the short-faced bear asks who you are, don't say lunch. If you feel the earth shake, it's either mammoths or your uncle snoring. Laughter arrives because it must. You also notice the quiet changes in the land that begin as soon as the big bodies thin. Grasses grow rank where mega herbivores once kept them honest. Shrubs invade. Fires change their minds about where to run. Water lingers in places that used to be trimmed by constant mouths. Mosquitoes applaud this with their usual restraint. Seeds that relied on enormous stomachs to travel now sulk under the parent tree. None of these thoughts belong fully in tonight's section, but they tug at your sleeve anyway, asking to be carried into tomorrow's. On a ridge, you give the wind your face and taste far snow and the promise of another migration. Behind you, an empty mammoth rub waits for a shoulder that won't return. Ahead, more valleys rehearse their own endings. You are not cruel, you are effective. Effectiveness scales. The last glow of your fire slides down to coals and then to nothing, the way many of the world's thunderous voices are sliding now. You shoulder your quiver and your quiet lever and feel, for a breath, the peculiar loneliness of success. Tomorrow you will stand on a hill and see a changed arrangement of grass and tree and sky. You will adjust, because that is your great talent, and the world will adjust around you, because it must. The Titans will step off stage in one place after another, and the play will go on with new actors and new cues. For now, you walk out of the willows with fat under your nails, glue on your fingers, a string humming softly from your bow, and a story growing heavier in your chest. You climb a low hill, and the view feels unfamiliar in ways you can't yet name. The grass is thicker, taller, less polite. Shrubs push into places that used to be pathways. Birch trees knit their pale arms where the wind once ran free. You smell damp leaf instead of clean, clipped herb. Something enormous is missing, and the land is already rearranging itself around the absence. You knew this would happen the first time a valley lost its mammoths. Now you can see it at scale. Where thunder-footed gardeners once trimmed and trampled, young forests learn confidence. The world you inherit is greener, closer, and a little harder to read at a distance. Fires change their manners. Without wall-to-wall grazers mowing the fuel, dry seasons build a pantry for lightning. When the spark comes, flames stand taller and wander longer. Wet places hold water where hoof churn once kept margins open, and mosquitoes update their mailing addresses. Seeds that counted on journeys through vast stomachs fall thick under their parent trees like unanswered letters. You recognize a story told in pollen and ash, layers the future will read like diaries, that says, after the giants step off stage, the set redecorates itself. The hunt comes home smaller and faster. Reindeer still thread certain valleys, but most of your basket weight now comes from deer, boar, birds, and fish. The kelp pantry you learned to trust on your first wanderings becomes a permanent line in the household budget. Weirs working while you nap still feel like legal magic. You rediscover the satisfaction of rabbit drives and net-caught ducks, and remember to thank the wind for cooperating. Darts and arrows still speak, but in shorter sentences. In the evening, an elder sits with a child at the edge of a clearing and points outward with a stick blackened from last night's stew. "Once," she says, "this was short grass all the way to that ridge, and the sky began lower. Your uncle would have tripped over a mammoth femur every third step and called it a good day." The child squints into the birches, silver stems in a close crowd, and tries to imagine rivers of hair and tusk moving where the trees now stand. The elder draws a quick line in the dust, a little arch for a rib, a sweep for a tusk, a dotted path where herds pressed habit into ground. The child asks, "Where did they go?" You answer the honest way. "We met them. The weather changed its mind." And then we noticed the silence. A mainstream fact anchors itself in the quiet. Around 11,700 years ago, the Holocene begins, the warm interval that cradles everything we think of as after. People will later propose that a new name belongs on top of it, the Anthropocene, because the human fingerprint turns into a palm print. Historians still argue whether that deserves a capital E epoch, or whether it's a cautionary poem more than a layer of rock. But the feeling under your feet is simple. Your species has become a force you can smell in smoke and read in the shape of hills. The work shifts with the world. If you want the same foods to meet you in the same places, you start tidying on purpose. Little burns at the edge of camp to invite fresh shoots for deer. Patches of thorn trimmed back so berries can breathe. A ring of stones around wild tubers to remind careless feet to step wide. Someone scatters seeds near the damp places where your firewood drip dries. And the next season, those same edible greens seem to like your company. It's not domestication yet. It's good manners with benefits. You're managing the pantry rather than sprinting between aisles. You learn which plants improve with attention and which sulk. A plot near camp becomes the grandmother's spot, full of roots that taste like stored sunlight. A boy who hates early mornings notices that gourds grow better where trash once sat and claims he was experimenting. He was not. A quirky tidbit you tuck behind your ear. Some fruits wear skins and carry stones designed for mouths that no longer patrol. Avocados with ridiculous seeds. Osage oranges like green brains. Evolutionary love letters meant for vanished postmen. You are not a mastodon, but you can read the hint. Your tool songs change key. Bone needles, once emergency winter heroes, become everyday artisans. Fitted clothing helps you move quietly in brush and sit long in blinds without talking your knees into mutiny. Nets get finer, basketry tightens, fish hooks take on delicate barbs you can brag about around the fire without quite being insufferable. You repair more and replace less because the nearest herd of replacement parts is now trees. The old open horizons become memories you keep bright on purpose. At night, you tell the child about the mammoth step, what it sounded like when the herd turned in its sleep, what it felt like when the ground seemed to have a pulse, how the air tasted of cold grass and animal oil, and the child nods, eyes wide, as if listening can bring it back. You don't say it out loud, but you know the story keeps a lesson inside it. When the ground changes the rules, learn them faster than your hunger does. You notice a new kind of attention forming at the edge of thought. With cousins gone, no Neanderthal camps across the ravine cooking marrow, no Denisovan trails bending down from high valleys, the mirror you hold up to yourself is now mostly your own face. You feel a subtle tilt in the way talk about people quietly begins to mean us and only us. That tilt can be useful. Coordination is easier when the room agrees on who's in it, and dangerous because rooms shrink when they don't have other doors. You file the thought with your other tools. Self-importance, like fire, needs tending and boundaries. Historians still argue whether the brushier, denser landscapes blooming after the megafauna fade are mostly climate's idea or mostly your unintended landscaping. Fewer trunks knocked down by giants, fewer trails toothed into grass by constant hooves, more saplings living long enough to call themselves woods. Pollen cores and charcoal layers argue both sides. Your ankles just note that walking takes longer, and stalking requires more patience. Either way, you tailor tactics. More stillness, more listening, more small cleverness. The seed of a larger change sits unremarkably in your hands one morning when you clean a patch beside a favorite spring and poke a few saved grains into soft dirt. Just to see. It feels like a joke, an attempt to train the weather. Weeks later, the little green says, maybe. You don't know it yet, but this is treason against a very old arrangement. Instead of chasing calories, you are asking them to stay. You keep doing it because asking turns out to be faster than running, and you've had enough of sprinting at dawn. Your humor survives the rearrangement, as it always does. Someone complains that the new forests are lovely until they remember how many mosquitoes can fit into a lovely. Someone else swears that the boar you chased today is the same one that laughed at you yesterday. Around the fire, a cousin claims to have invented pantry management and unveils a row of shells hung on cord to track dried fish. You clap because clapping is free and the idea is good. Ochre still decorates forearms when the sun picks fights, and there's always one person who insists the paste makes them run faster. You let them have it. Belief is a tool, too. You keep your callbacks like talismans. The tinder fungus that carries a coal like a sleeping heart. The bow that turns breath into lines. The lever that makes arms longer than arguments. The shell beads that still say "we" in a language you don't have to speak out loud. The old competence threads through the new thickets, and you feel gratitude for how much of yesterday's kit still solves today's puzzles. From the hill, you trace where the herds used to move and where the young trees insist on standing now. You follow a creek that slicks its stones in confetti colors and imagine where a little dam might slow it into a pool for fish. You place your palm on bark and feel water move under your hand. The world you inherit is softer at the edges and sharper inside. It asks you to lean closer, listen harder, and trade sprinting for staying. You don't know the words field or garden yet, but your hands are already telling those stories to the soil. Night climbs the birches like a careful animal. You bank the fire, habit more than need, and the coals go ruby and then thoughtful. In the pause before sleep, you feel the loneliness again, the one that began when the last cousin's fires went out and grew when the giant's silhouettes left the sky. You are the only kind of human now, and the only animal that talks itself into futures this complicated. It's a lot of room to be alone in. You breathe, count the quiet, and let the feeling pass through you like a front. Tomorrow you'll wake to birds who don't remember mammoths, trees that do, and a world that says yes if you ask it slowly. The past you carry will keep tugging at your sleeves. Ghosts in your blood. Instincts that prefer salt and story. A taste for shadows at the edge of camps. You'll listen. And as you step down from the hill, you can already feel the next thought forming. Not in words, but in a soft push behind the ribs. What of that world still lives in you now? Take a breath in your own room and feel the draft lift the hairs on your forearms the way grass once did. Darkness here is button-operated, not sky-made, and yet when you close your eyes, the old world stands up inside you, tall as ever. The mammoth step still hums under the modern carpet. The cave fire that taught your gaze to love moving light now lives in a small glass rectangle you scroll without noticing why it feels like home. You are the only kind of human left, but you are not alone. Your body is a caravan of old travelers. Open your hands. In the pattern of your fingerprints, in the angle of your cheekbones, in how your skin greets winter, other people travel with you. If your family's path wandered outside Africa, 1 to 2% of your genome is Neanderthal, an inheritance measured not in legend but in cells. Some fragments coach your immune system like a winter camp elder. Some nudge your hair and skin to answer daylight a little differently. If your roots run through Oceania or parts of Asia, Denisovan threads wind through your code as quietly as creek water under reeds. They don't make you less anything. They make you more perfectly you. A mainstream fact anchors this feeling. Many modern Tibetans carry a version of a gene that helps with life at high altitude. A hand-me-down from Denisovan mingling long ago. The same ancient mixing left small edits elsewhere in immunity and oxygen use. Little notes scrawled in the margins of the human manual. Your body reads them without ever bragging about its citations. Your teeth remember things too. In some families from East Asia and the Americas, the first lower molar sprouts 3 roots instead of 2. It works fine. It just surprises dentists and wins bar bets. Call it a quirky heirloom from deep time, a hint that the family portrait used to be crowded. You carry other souvenirs as well. A tendon in the wrist that many people don't need but still own. A little ear bump some of us wear like a signature. Goosebumps that valiantly try to fluff a fur coat nobody has had in quite a while. When the room chills and your skin pebbles, that's your Pleistocene thermostat politely offering to fetch more mammoth. But the echo is loudest inside the part of you that tells stories. Around African fires you learned to stack sentences, to hang an entire tomorrow on a single promise, to recruit strangers to a shared idea. That trick never left. Corporations, nations, clubs, faiths. These are just large, organized campfires that keep the night back by speaking in unison. When a crowd chants in a stadium, you feel old warmth lick your shins. When a rumor travels like gossip and changes a city's morning, you are watching the same old magic work with new costumes. Even your evening ritual, gathering around flickering light, swapping news, laughing in the soft hours, hasn't changed. The set dressing did. The script is the same. Of course, shadows travel with the light. Your tongue cheers for sugar and fat, because in the Pleistocene those flavors meant survival, not snacks. Your eyes spot snakes and spiders faster than flowers because the penalty for missing a flower was boredom. Your mind draws circles. Us and not us, with a speed that once kept your band safe and now mostly fuels comment sections. None of this dooms you. It just means you live with roommates who evolved under different weather. You can thank them for their service and still set house rules. The old kit keeps whispering advice. Remember the ochre paste rubbed on forearms to keep the sun honest and the flies undecided? You're still mixing meaning and utility anytime you paint symbols that both say "we" and get work done. Logos and wayfinding and wristbands that let a crowd behave like a single animal. Remember the coal you carried in tinder fungus, a sleeping heart that walked all day. You carry attention like that now, guarding it, feeding it, shielding it from stray sparks. The lever that made your arm longer, your atlatl, lives on in every tool that amplifies your small reach without demanding bruises. A pen, a radio, a message that flies farther than your voice and lands safely. Used well, these tools make distance kind. Used badly, they make it loud. You've met both kinds of camp. Historians still argue whether the mind's great takeoff was a spark or a slow burn, whether language, art, trade, and wide-net cooperation arrived as a sudden festival or a long rehearsal, and how much of that music your cousins were already playing. The answer matters. It also doesn't. Even if genius came in gusts, the tents it raised stayed up because thousands of ordinary hands kept tying ropes. Your hands still do. Every time you pass along a recipe, a lullaby, a better knot, you become the quiet mechanism that moves civilizations. Step closer to a mirror. See the brow curve, the jaws angle, the unremarkable miracle of eyes. Behind those windows a chorus hums. Erectus patience measuring distance. Neanderthal sturdiness insisting that a seam be double-stitched. Denisovan altitude calm asking your breath to become a metronome. Floresiensis mischief reminding you that small and clever is often the best kind of strong. Sapiens restlessness drawing lines on cave walls and calling them maps. You carry all of them into rooms they could not imagine, and you seat them at the table as calmly as you pour water. Kindness still gets its turn at the fire. Think of the Neanderthal elder with the fused hip who ate because a group moved at the speed of care. Think of the footprints at La Roselle, so many small heels learning where to put weight. And pick your sentences the way a hunter places feet on crusted snow. Courage is still the necessary thing, but it isn't always the charging kind. Sometimes it is the sitting kind, the sort that keeps the circle open for the latecomer and hands them the warmest bowl. The losses are part of you too. In an empty valley of the mind, you still carry a Maustrian point and a little ache for a joke that nobody tells anymore. You remember a mammoth rub polished smooth by generations and feel a brief, unreasonable faith that silhouettes like that never end. When the present feels too thin, add the missing shadows back in. A line of cranes, a tail disappearing into sedge, an ember passed from palm to palm. Grief is also an inheritance. It teaches tenderness to people who are very good at tools. You are the child of contingency and the parent of intention. The world you wake into each morning is not the one your ancestors knew, but it grows on the same trellis. Try something, keep what works, teach it to the next hands. You are still the animal that thanks the meal and banks the coals. You are also the experiment that tries to make tomorrow gentler than yesterday. The distance between those truths is the space where culture lives. Stories, songs, small rules that let many live together without stepping on ankles. And yes, you still walk coastlines. The modern version is a string of cities whose tide is trains and whose shellfish are ideas. You still set weirs, calendars, and habits that keep working while you sleep. You still look for banner stones, beautiful physics, when you weigh a tool's elegance as much as its function. Some of your old jokes keep working too. If the short-faced bear asks who you are, don't say lunch. If mosquitoes love your lovely new forest, call it a compliment and light some smoke. Before sleep takes you, test one last echo. Cup your hand and breathe into it. Feel the warmth fill the small shelter your fingers make. That is the oldest technology. Breath kept inside a circle you draw, light kept inside a ring you tend. people kept inside a promise you speak. You have walked a very long way to arrive where you are. The ground remembers, so do you. Let the edges soften now. Let the sentences lengthen the way river water smooths around a stone. You are lying where you are, but some quiet part of you is still walking an old path. Silver grass bending, a slow wind brushing your arms like friendly hands. The fire is small and patient. It keeps the night politely outside the circle, and you sit just inside, warm cheek to warm palm, feeling the tiny push and pull of breath moving like tide. Picture a coastline from long ago. Low tide, wet sand shining, your footprints filling with sky. A dog is sleeping close, sighing in the simple language of safe dreams. Far off, a mammoth herd becomes a soft grey hill that moves, then stills. You don't have to follow them tonight. You don't have to solve anything. All the tools are put away, the points sheathed, the cords coiled, the little bead pouch tied with a kind knot so nothing wanders. Let that calm put weight in your limbs. Your ribs rise and fall like dunes under moonlight. The room you're in fades to the gentle geography of a camp. One ember bright, then dim, then bright again. A voice, yours or an elder's, tells a simple story in a low tone. We walked, we ate, we thanked the ground, we slept. Somewhere in the dark, a night bird speaks once, then tucks its head beneath a wing. Even the wind is drowsy. It has nowhere urgent to be. If a thought arrives, let it sit by the fire for a moment and warm its hands, then watch it yawn and wander off. If memory brings a face, give it a bowl of stew and a blanket, and tell it it's welcome to stay until morning. The old world and the new world overlap like palms in a greeting. The line where they meet is soft as ash. Your breathing is steady, the sort of calm you could use as a map. Inhale the cool, exhale the warm, and feel how ancient that rhythm is. Older than your house, older than your name, older than any story you've learned to tell. You have come far. You are held. The fire is low, the night is kind, and sleep is close enough to touch.